I call this meeting on the Planning and Zoning Commission of May 17, 2023 to order. Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Lori.
Chairman Richardson.
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Here.
Secretary Grant.
Here.
Member Perez.
Here.
Member Faison.
Here.
Member Garrod. Alternate Member Childs.
Here.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Here.
School Board Member Gilbert.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. The next item will be approval of 2 minutes, one of April the 5th and the second one of April 19th. Have you had a chance to look at the minutes of April the 5th? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion made by Member Aton,
Second.
seconded by Member Perez. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Faison.
Yes.
Secretary Grant.
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
Member Rogers.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Yes.
Member Garrod.
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Next item is the minutes of April 19th. Have you had a chance to review those?
I'll move to approve.
And I second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Faison.
Yes.
Secretary Grant.
Yes.
Member Perez.
Yes.
Member Rogers.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton.
Yes.
Member Garrod. Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Next item, item 6, quasi-judicial confirmation procedures. I would turn it over to the attorney.
Thank you. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedure adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first. Those opposed will be heard second. And those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you. There's no consent agenda items, no old business, so we're to new business, item 9A. Eddie.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This item begins on page 15 of 338 of tonight's agenda packet. And I'll read the summary. Florida statutes requires local governments to update their water supply facilities work plan as part of their comprehensive plan within 18 months of approval of a regional water supply plan by a water management district. The work plan was updated by staff and submitted to St. Johns River Water Management District in February of 2023 for approval. Recommendations related to the Water Management District supply plan were incorporated, and the work plan has been finalized for approval. The City Council adopted the 2023 Water Supply Facilities Work Plan at their April 11, 2023 regular meeting. The amendment proposes to revise several policies in the city's comprehensive plan. Page 19, wanted to highlight the change to the city's level of service for water supply. And that's shown in red, underlined and stricken. We've got the previous capacity was 96.4 gallons per capita per day. And based on discussion with the Water Management District, it's now more appropriate to recommend an average water consumption rate of 81 gallons per capita per day. And my understanding is that that's based on the more efficient shower heads and fixtures that are being replaced over time. And so over time, our uses across the land are using less water. And so there's less water that's needed for each of these uses. Additionally, I wanted to point out page 43. So on page 43, I'll read section D. It says, "The potable water demand projected for the years 2022 through 2040 is presented in Table B. By 2022, the average daily demand is projected to be 4.965 megagallons per day, increasing to 6.459 megagallons by the year 2040. Based on current resources, there is sufficient system capacity for the future water demands through the year 2035. Additional capacity improvements may need to be planned to accommodate the subsequent 5-year horizon through the year 2040 to increase the permitted capacity, including constructing additional wells permitted as part of the city's approved consumptive use permit and master utility planning for new developments such as the Antigua Bay and Verona projects and other areas." And so what we're asking tonight is a recommendation to City Council on whether to transmit this change to our comprehensive plan to the state agency who reviews changes to comprehensive plans, the DEO, Department of Economic Opportunity, and that's the request tonight.
Okay, are there any questions of the staff? Any questions?
Um,
Yeah,
2035.
your, Mike.
I'm sorry, excuse me. 2035, is that when the level of service might start being compromised slightly?
Correct. Based on current projections, that's when there could be supply issues. And so what the report identifies is that by that year, there need to have been made additional capacity, some additional sources for water.
I trust somebody has something in mind, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Member Rogers.
What is the chance that, I mean, I guess we're not getting a huge percentage of what we use from Cocoa, but I just wondered, what is the chance that Cocoa will stop selling us water?
I don't believe that there's ever been an issue with receiving water from Cocoa.
Okay.
We currently provide enough water that we don't need to rely on the supply from the city of Cocoa, but we have that as an available resource.
Okay.
Vice Chairman Aton.
On that table, it shows what I'm assuming are population numbers just below the year dates. And it says total service area. I was curious, because that seems high for the population of the city. Are there, what other,
I'm sorry, which page are you on?
43? There's a table that, or 44, I'm sorry. Total service area population projections you referred to?
So that's beyond just the city's population. That's our service area, which the city's urban service area includes service to areas outside the existing city limits.
And so what are some of those service areas? I didn't realize we had,
They're
Much
usually
service.
unincorporated pockets just north and south of the city.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Lori, do we have any cards?
No cards.
No cards. Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission members. Any other questions?
I just had a couple, I guess. Are we trying to sort of boost the permeable surfaces when new surfaces go in, whether they be parking lots or just to try to get a little more recharge?
Sure, yeah. So we have two areas of critical concern, which is the areas within the city where we limit the amount of impervious surface a development can have to recharge the groundwater supply.
Okay. And I just saw that there was $50,000 or $45,000 that was going to the water conservation program, which they said is generally just kind of trying to educate the public about what to do. It almost seemed to me like, that and maybe either subsidizing or giving away water, saving, I don't know, sinks or faucets or whatever it would be, might be kind of the low-hanging fruit. But, like getting people to, if indeed, just by changing shower heads, we've gone down from 96 to 81 gallons, I don't know, maybe educating people. Obviously, we're all going to hit a time in Florida where we don't have enough water, and perhaps we'll be desalinating at that point, but it'd be nice to not drink the place dry, before then. It's a little sobering to see, in 2035, permitted surplus 0.007.
Sure, I'll add that Water Conservation Office does currently provide low-flow shower heads, so maybe additional marketing that program is available would help.
Yeah.
2035 is only 11 years away. Any other questions of the staff? Okay, is anyone prepared to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Secretary Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like to present the motion to recommend transmittal to the state. This is to the state, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Garad. Any other points? Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. And that is to be heard at council meeting next week, is that correct? Okay. Item 9B.
Item 9B begins on page 47. I'll read from the summary on page 48. And I know that we have a pretty unwieldy agenda package tonight with 338 pages and different sizes and orientations, so if I need to go a little slower, let me know. The applicant, Darien One Partners LLC, on behalf of Carmine Ferraro for North Point 10.87 Trust, is requesting a voluntary annexation and small-scale comprehensive plan amendment with rezoning on approximately 15.08 acres for purposes of constructing a multifamily residential project consisting of 138 apartments. The subject property is made up of two parcels. One parcel lies within the unincorporated county, which is 2605 Donna Drive, and is the site of an existing single-family home. This parcel has a Brevard County future land use designation of agricultural and agricultural residential zoning designation. The second parcel, which is vacant, lies within the city with a future land use designation of low-intensity commercial and community commercial zoning district. The parcels are located west of US Highway 1 and north of Dairy Road. The intent of the request is to change the property to the city's medium-density residential future land use category and planned development PD zoning district with master plan to support the intended multifamily development. The PD ordinance submitted as part of the application limits uses on the property to 138 apartments, which is 9.15 units per acre, ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms and associated parking, dog park, pool, clubhouse, recreational trails, and amenities. Accessory structures are limited to private swimming pools, space, including screen enclosures, detached accessory structures, and home-based businesses as permitted by the city. Open space, including tree and wetland preservation areas, exceed 50% of the total site area. The findings: the annexation is consistent with the criteria described in Chapter 171 of Florida statutes. The comprehensive plan future land use amendment is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The rezoning is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the land development regulations, including PD and rezoning criteria described in Section 33-8 and 34-40 of the code. The master plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, land development regulations, and master plan requirements as described in Chapter 34, Article 2, Division 3 of the code. The conditions of approval include a maximum of 138 residential units, a minimum size of 600 square feet. Buildings and all structures shall be no greater than 45 feet in height. A recreational plan shall be submitted with the site plan that illustrates a significant increase in recreational amenities in the open space areas, including a multi-use path with exercise stations, a bicycle shelter, picnic areas with benches, grills, and gazebos. Additional conditions address the potential of potable water for irrigation purposes and the use of low-impact development techniques to meet stormwater requirements. Further conditions limit the number of driveways and their location. Finally, a condition of approval related to cultural resources is included. So I do want to point the commission to a number of sections or a number of pages throughout your agenda packet. The first is going to be page 55, describing the cultural resources. In section, the future land use element policy 1.4.2. And actually, before I get to that, I just want to remind the commission that this application is under one agenda item as a small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, but it includes 3 actions that we'll need you to take action on tonight, 3 recommendations. The first is whether to annex the north parcel. The second is whether to change the future land use designation on both parcels to the medium-density residential. And then the third is to change the zoning to rezone the property to PD and accept the associated master plan with the PD zoning, which acts as the zoning district.
Are we allowed to have 1 public hearing for that, or do we have to have 3? Chelsea?
I would recommend that you have 3 so that there is an opportunity for people to speak on the subsequent actions after the first one's presented, because they have different criteria for your decisions.
Okay.
So again, this future land use element, policy 1.4.2, the staff comment reads, "The property is adjacent to the historic LaGrange Church and cemeteries. The church is listed on the National Historic Register. The applicant identified headstones on the subject property that may be associated with the historic cemetery. It is recommended that a cultural resources survey be conducted to verify the existence of additional burial associated with the cemetery prior to any construction work. A condition of approval may be added to the PD rezoning ordinance and master plan to request additional information and to propose a protection or mitigation plan for those resources." The next section I wanted to point you to is on page 59. And that's related to the environmental impacts. The staff comment reads, "Except for 1 single-family residence, the property is currently undeveloped land with dense tree coverage. The submitted landscape plan states that 183,820 square feet, or 27.8% of the existing canopy and an understory vegetation will be maintained. There are 2 heritage trees on the site, and the applicant is not proposing to remove either tree. The applicant states that incentive 2 of section 30-34 K2 is met, and a tree mitigation plan for protected and specimen trees is not required. The applicant submitted an environmental assessment report describing the location of 2 wetlands, which are proposed to be placed in conservation easements. While the environmental report identifies these wetlands, neither the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Wetlands Inventory Map or the city's future land use map indicate wetlands are present on the site. The applicant states the development is not proposed to encroach into these areas. The environmental assessment stated that the presence of threatened species has been identified and that the required review and permitting by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission will be required." Next is on page 65. So this is a revision that we made to the staff report, which we've provided in the Agenda Star, but I understand that Agenda Star can be a little cumbersome, so we have printed versions. Is it preferable that I provide the printed versions? Sure. Thank you. Essentially, it's updating the section reference. We provided a section reference stating section 9.6 when it was, should be referencing section 9.11. And then it also states that the number of driveways is limited based on the number of residential units, but what it says is actually based on the frontage of the lot. And so we've revised that. So throughout the document, we've highlighted we've highlighted those sections that have been updated with the new section reference. And then I just wanted to point you to where the language was changed on page 16 of 19. So now it currently reads, "Section 9.11 of the city's Transportation Infrastructure Technical Manual limits the number of driveways to 1 on each road. A waiver is necessary to approve the second driveway." And then I'll wrap up by presenting the findings and recommendation and point you to the concept plan if you have questions about the proposal. The findings and recommendation begin on page 67. It states, "The annexation is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan in Chapter 171 of the Florida statutes. The comprehensive plan future land use small-scale map amendment is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The rezoning and conditions of approval is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the land development regulations, including PD and rezoning criteria described in section 33-8 and 3440 of the code. The master plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, land development regulations, and master plan requirements described in chapter 34, article 2, division 3 of the code. The recommendations: the annexation, recommend approval of the annexation of the 3.54 acre parcel. For the comprehensive plan amendment, approve the comprehensive plan future land use small scale map amendment for the Brevard County comprehensive plan agricultural land use category for the 3+ acre property with parcel number 21-35-29-00-8. And with the rezoning, approve the rezoning with conditions. The conditions of approval include a maximum of 138 residential units, a minimum size of 600 square feet. Buildings and all structures shall be no greater than 45 feet in height. A recreational plan shall be submitted with the site plan that illustrates a significant increase in recreational amenities in the open space areas, including a multi-use path with exercise stations, a bicycle shelter, picnic areas with benches, grills, and gazebos. Additional conditions address the potential of potable water for irrigation purposes and the use of low-impact development techniques to meet stormwater requirements. Further conditions limit the number of driveways and their location. Finally, a condition of approval related to the protection or mitigation of cultural resources is included.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to revisit what I've said and allow one public hearing to be opened for all of the members of the public to comment on these 3 agenda items, and then the 3 ordinances that are under one agenda item. And if the commission would like to allow each speaker additional time, because there are 3 ordinances, you guys can make that determination once the speaker asks for additional time. I think it would be smoother if we have one public hearing for this one agenda item to encompass the 3 ordinances. And if the speaker would like to identify which of the 3 ordinances they are for or against, then that will help your decision, as you will vote on each of the 3 ordinances in consecutive order as they're presented in your agenda.
So you're saying there'll be one public hearing and 3 different motions?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions of the staff? Okay, well, I'll open the public hearing. The first one to speak is the applicant.
Good evening, members of the council, and want to thank you for your time tonight. I'm John Marling, 6354 Masters Boulevard in Orlando, Florida, and I'm chairman of Investors Realty, co-sponsor of our proposed Dairy Road project. The other co-sponsor is my wife, Heidi Marling, who's president of Investors Realty and co-owner of Village Partners and the management company Residence Management, Inc. Just a little bit about the company. We've been doing this for 40 years in residential and apartment development for the last 28 years, during which we've built about 6,000 units. We try and take each one individually and see what might work for the city, and we're trying to, conform. And that's why we came in under a PD as opposed to any speculative zoning. On the 6,000 units, we're very proud of the last 4 developments. 3 of them received Best of the Best from the Tampa Tribune and the Lakeland Ledger. One's Champions Gate just inside of Champions Gate in Kissimmee. Second one is the Avenue in South Lakeland, and the third one is Lolette Simmons Loop next to the big hospital in Riverview, south of Tampa. I think, turning to the development, this has been a really good process, but an interesting process with all the tree surveys. We've conformed to the tree ordinance. We have, I believe, about 27% canopy, over 50% open space, and we're trying to just work through the reiterations of the plan with the staff and its requirements. And I think, you know, it's really going to be a neat project. It would be about a $39 to $40 million project. And we're just excited about what you people think about it and where we go from here. We have a great staff, and Jim McKnight, who you may probably know of, Coco, will present the development and the review and the PowerPoint. And we have Bruce Moya, our project engineer, who will handle any questions about, you know, drainage and, you know, the grading on the property and utilities and things of that sort, as well as our plan to have a private well to irrigate the property. We have James Wilson with Kimley Horn for traffic, and we've been through most of his report, and I think it conforms pretty well and has less traffic than a lot of other things that could be built at that corner. We also have Susan Hall, who's our landscape professional and handled all of the tree surveys. We counted every tree several times and are preserving as many trees as we possibly can. And then Kim Rozenka of Lacey, Lyons, and Rozenka represents us for, you know, the ordinance and any legal aspects of it. So I'd like to call on Jim McKnight to go through the presentation and the PowerPoint. Jim?
Mr. McKnight, were you the city manager of Rockledge at some point?
For 31 years,
Yeah,
I was.
I thought so.
He said Cocoa. I never lived in Cocoa, so make sure we clarify that. Yes, I was. And I retired last year from the city of Cocoa Beach. And I will try not to be repetitive. Okay. All righty. Advancement. Okay. I'm pretty bad with technology, so excuse me. Again, thank you for your time tonight. Again, I'm trying not to be repetitive. He's given a pretty good summary of the application that has gone in. The SSA 11-22 includes a request that includes 3.5 acres to be annexed into the city and added to the existing parcel, which is inside of the city limits of Titusville. It is a small-scale future land use amendment requesting that it be changed to medium-density residential. The entire property is slightly over 15 acres in size. Our parcel location is situated adjacent to US 1. It's in relative proximity to job centers such as Eastern Florida State College and Parish Medical Center. We also know there's been a lot of other job growth in the area. We have some statistics on that if it's desired to see those. The current zoning map, let me move on. This is the location map so everybody can see it in proximity to other areas of the city. The existing zoning map has the property as community, commercial, and agricultural residential. As you can see, there is commercial directly across on Dairy Road from this property, residential to the west, north of the cemetery. The lower density multifamily would serve as a transitory zoning from US 1 to the single family that is to the west. I've worked on a number of projects in Brevard County over the last year relative to multifamily, and this is by far the lowest density multifamily project I've been involved in at 9.15 units per acre. So this would serve as a step down in zoning between US 1 and the single family that does exist to the west, primarily to the northwest. The site plan, since we're considering all of this at one time, the site plan is 138 units dispersed throughout the property. However, if you'll notice that most of the development of all but two of the buildings has been moved away from the single family. Again, in currently working on many projects in this county, I'm seeing higher densities. So I think these developers are looking to build something that is more compatible with the area. And I think that is obvious with a 50.8% open space as defined by the city of Titusville. And the annex parcel will only have one building on it. It will be primarily dry retention, and all requirements for recreational amenities, which were pointed out in the staff report, will be met or exceeded in order to meet that requirement. That gives you some information on the tree canopy, the heritage trees, the 20-foot landscape buffer, though the 35-foot to the buildings is for all buildings, particularly in that northwest corner where you have the carve-out, and a 25-foot buffer for the wetlands as well. Again, emphasizes the amount of open space on the property, over half, and 35% is what is required by the PD ordinance in the city of Titusville. One other thing we wanted to show you, we've done sight lines. The landscape architect has with the trees. This is for the 3-story, which there's one that has the side of the building towards the residential. And this is this 2-story site visibility line relative to the residential that would be on the north side of this 2-story building. So we have looked at it in order to buffer this. One of the comments that was made at the neighborhood meeting was a concern about what kind of wall, fence, whatever would be put on the property in that area. And it would be a solid wall for that corner completely. So all of the residential would have a solid 6-foot wall adjacent to it. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to James, our traffic engineer, and let him go over the next few slides.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening. James Taylor with Kimley Horn and Associates, 189 South Orange Avenue, Orlando, Florida. I did manage the traffic impact analysis for the site in the city of Titusville. This is a very standardized document that has to go in with a lot of developments that you oversee. The first step for that is establishing a methodology. This is the list of assumptions that we're going to use in the traffic study. We coordinate with staff and we follow your land development code when we do that. And that identifies the study area for the project. In this case, US 1, Dairy Road, and 3 area intersections identified, 1, 2, 3, if you can see them on the chart, as well as the driveways. We generate trip generation, not what we think it's going to be, but by what the empirical data shows us for a development of this size. And then we distribute those trips that's generated by the site throughout the study area based on DOT's latest regional travel demand model. So again, very standardized. And the point of this traffic impact study specific to this project was twofold. First, we wanted to identify the traffic impact that's going to be generated based on the change in the comprehensive plan amendment designation. And then 2, look at operationally how the study area roadways and intersections operate in the existing and then in the build out condition. So for the first part of that traffic impact analysis, or TIA, we looked at what the trip generation would be if maximum density was built out on the site with today's future land use amendment. In that case, the commercial allows for a large shopping center, around 258,000 square feet. That could generate potentially up to a daily trip count of 9,500 trips. And in the PM peak hour, that looks something just shy of 900 trips. What's being proposed today with the change in land use amendment, it's actually a significant down zone. Once you go down to the 10 DUs per acre, the dwelling units per acre, the daily trips are almost cut by a factor of 10. In the build-out scenario with the residential land use, you could have a daily trip count of 999 daily, and in the peak hour, only 82 trips. So again, a 10-fold decrease as a result of the comp plan amendment. And then secondly, we looked at specific to what the applicant is proposing in a site plan. It's actually even a little bit less than that 10 units per acre. As you heard the staff report, the condition would be a maximum of 138 units. That's equivalent to about 80 PM peak hour trips, 50 in, 30 out. So we're talking about a volume of less than one vehicle per minute in either direction. If you want to I wanted to point out a couple of things that have some perspective on what that looks like on the roadways for the residents. On Daly Road, the traffic that would be generated by that 80 trips is about 5% of the maximum service capacity of that road today. Today, Dairy Road's operating at about 58% of capacity, and the build-out condition, and this is with a little bit of background growth for not just this project, but for other projects in the area, it goes from 58% to about 62%, so a modest rise in how the capacity is performing out there. On US 1, even less, it's less than 1% of the adopted service volume of that road. Today, US 1 in this area adjacent to the project is operating at about 49% of the capacity, and in the build-out condition with the background growth and the project, that rises from 49% up to 51%. The general conclusion of the study the operational portion of the study is there's no existing traffic deficiencies identified due to the project impact, and I'll be standing by for questions as needed. Next, Jim, are you for the rendering?
Okay, we're just giving you, this would be actually rendering up what the front would look like to the clubhouse entry. The proposed pool area, which is moved to the southeast portion of the property. This is what a two-story building will look like with attached garages. We did hold a community engagement meeting on February 28th. As I spoke earlier, there were some comments made. As a result of those, some changes were made to the overall plan.
Let me ask
We
you
did
a
not have a
question.
big-
Let me ask you a question about the community engagement meeting. We have it in our packet. There are only 2 people that showed up at community engagement meeting.
No, I think there were 5,
Only 2 signed.
but only 2 signed. Yeah, we told them asked them to, but we can't make them sign in.
Understand.
But yeah, we had about 5 people there. So I know I spoke to 3 myself, so. Anyway, yes, you are correct. We only had 5 people show up. Beyond that, this is just some inside views of some of the previous projects that they have built. One thing I did want to reiterate, staff may have said it, but I wanted to go over it again, and that's that this does meet the requirements of Chapter 171 of the Florida State Statutes relative to annexation. It does meet all the criteria for that. And you may have said it, I just wanted to reiterate that as being important. I think the client has proven that they have done projects that are high quality throughout the state. And, there are some points that we have addressed along the way. We went through, I believe, 5 iterations of plans before we finally got to the one that you're seeing tonight. So with that, I will give way to any questions from any member of our team that you may have.
Any questions?
I have a question for,
No, go
Member C
ahead.
was first. Member Garrett was first.
the question in the sequence of these 3 ordinances, the relevance of annexation, as you just mentioned, meeting 171 is one discussion. You're kind of getting into the depth of the project with all the site plan analyses. Would it be preferred that we discuss and act on the annexation, and then if the questions occur on the site plan and the PUD zoning district and others like-kind questions that arise are more pertinent to that ordinance than asking them prematurely?
Well, I would recommend that we stay with one public hearing. And then we have all kinds of questions. We ask them whenever appropriate in the hearing. If you've got questions regarding different things, ask them.
So we are moving towards just asking any question, regarding
One
all these
public
3 different.
One public hearing,
Okay.
3 separate actions.
Actually, let somebody else go first.
Member Faison.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
How you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. Glad to have you here. First question I'd like to ask, these units, and how much do you guys propose the rental for these units will be?
John, you want to address that? Rental rates.
In order to answer the question, you have to be up at the podium. I'm sorry.
You want me to just answer it, Heidi? $1,475 to $2,475.
Okay. Will any of these be reserved for low income to moderate income individuals?
No, not specifically.
Secretary Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been said that there have been some possible grave burial plots from LaGrange on your property. If it turns out that they are part of the historic cemetery, you said that you would preserve and mitigate. Exactly what does that mean?
Well, in the case so far, what has been identified is there are some actually, what was the dimension, John? Right. So
I'm sorry, say again?
there is a small portion where there are 3 gravestones.
Have they been identified? as
They've
being
been
part?
identified and they will be dedicated to the LaGrange Society. They
Okay.
will actually be taken out of the project.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't want to mess with that.
Thank you, sir.
Member Gay Run.
Oh, thank you. I'll try to put them in sequence of questions.
Sure.
The report you read earlier, Eddie, spoke about multiple driveways accessing Dairy Road,
Yes,
and the criterion is 200 feet. You're showing 2 driveways. The implication in the staff report is 1 driveway. Am I confused by that, or is the site plan consistent with the requirements?
no, the site plan requests 2 driveways and we
I
do
was
know
asking
that
the
that.
staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. So the site plan, the concept plan, the master plan for this, attached to this PD, shows 2 driveways. The code requires that, the code allows for 2 driveways if you have a frontage greater than 200 feet, but it also limits for a corner lot, you can only have 1 frontage, 1 access point on each frontage. In this case, they're proposing 2 access points on the same frontage, which is allowable if approved with a DRC waiver, Development Review Committee waiver. And so they're proposing it tonight as a conceptual. Any approval with that second driveway would need to be approved contingent upon receiving a future waiver.
So if I can understand that, we're evaluating a site plan as part of our determination for these 3 ordinances. A site plan that illustrates one thing, but it may be subject to change afterwards.
Correct. And I do want to clarify that a site plan typically is meant to mean a site development permit, the schematic that goes with the site development permit. And what we're showing tonight is more of a conceptual plan development master plan. And so things do change. The code does allow for changes to those types of plans. There's the tables in section 6.3.3 of our technical manuals has a list of minor modifications and major modifications. And where there's something that's a major modification would have to go back to city council and planning and zoning for review.
Okay, so in terms of modification, the traffic engineer may want to address this in subsequent to my question to you, and that is that if you remove 1 of 2 driveways because you do not obtain this special authorization to deviate from the standard, then the stacking movements and traffic turning movements in both directions are going to be intensified from one that was the analysis was done with 2 driveways, I presume. We put 1 driveway on a 2-lane road. The old saying, the cart before the horse, the traffic impact that I see is probably correct and consistent with what the data was, that it's a low impact in terms of capacity. But when capacity continues to be compromised by new development, at some point you're going to reach a problem where turning movements from a 2-lane road into an apartment complex intensified to 1 driveway would create, I believe, a significant impact on Dairy Road. The question is staff going to analyze that for the potential of turn lanes installed in the two-lane section should you go to a one driveway entrance for 183 apartments.
Yes, sir, absolutely. So that's part of the site plan review.
And there's standards by where this data that was provided, which is, as it is shown to us, it seems to be a pretty low intensity for traffic movements in and out at peak periods. Putting one driveway is a concern and having it occur after we review the project, I just want to be sure that staff's going to be able to say, you have to improve the roadway if warrants are there. Roadway improvements to me is going to be a turn lane, left turn movements. That's, so you've made me feel comfortable. That's what the analysis of the site plan. The next question may be for the arborist, and you're shaking your head. I'm noticing you're agreeing with what I said or how I'm saying it. The site plan and all the data was really kind of tough to look at. I saw the number of trees on the survey. So the first question I have for your arborist or environmentalist, your analysis doesn't talk about tree health, it just talks about size. And so I'd like to know a little bit about these, you call them heritage trees. I guess that's a connotation within your ordinance, the ordinance, I should say, not your ordinance. And so has tree health been examined for these heritage trees? And I'm guessing, I'm going to step out there, the two largest I saw, I tried my best to reconcile the different maps and illustrations to kind of overlay where are these tremendously large diameter oaks, heritage oaks, I guess they would be. I think they're like tree numbers 2083, 2106. There's groups of numbers I wrote down. Can you help me know where these are on the site plan we're looking at and how they were considered to be protected and what their health is?
And please identify your name and address for the record.
Sure, we can ask the media services.
There we go.
It's up.
That one? Yeah. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Susan Hall, landscape architect, 244 McLeod Street, Merritt Island, Florida. I have walked the site on 2 occasions with our civil engineer, and we began the whole process by walking the site and evaluating the trees. Generally speaking, they're all in very good condition. The heritage tree, there's one that's 60 inches, and it's on the upper right round green circle that you see there, indicating that tree.
Upper, I'm sorry, I can't see quite
I'm
that
sorry, I
far.
guess it would be the furthest east.
Okay,
is what I'd
the
say.
large green blob on the east side.
Yes.
Okay.
And the second one is about halfway along the length of Dairy Road, and it's close to the south property line.
You
So-
answered my questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The last questions, they all came in order. I mentioned this before, I'll probably reiterate it, I apologize. On this project, there's a maximum building height incorporated into the planned development zoning. That's a zoning height restriction. That says maximum structural height 45 feet. That's maximum height of any appendages to the buildings, inclusive of structures that may project above the roof line. I've mentioned this at one of our last meetings. That's a particularly difficult subject that I hope we can eliminate, which is the difference between building codes and maximum height and zoning codes. This is a zoning code as a PD. The restriction is a zoning code, so it shouldn't be any subject to interpretation. 45 feet, maximum height of structures is 45 feet. I presume that's from ground level, center line of the highway. Not that we're in a mountainous region, I don't imply that, but there can be differences in height if you don't know where you're measuring from. So I presume this would be from grade height, post-development, after fill, 45 feet. Would that be the answer?
So again, similar to the last time you brought this issue up, it's the same idea that the zoning code establishes a building height, and then the building code, or at least the current policy with the city, is that we use the building code's Florida Building Code's definition of building height, which is the average of the roof heights. In this case, they didn't show pitched heights to where there would be a difference between that. If you wanted to add that as a condition that building height be measured in that particular way, you could add that as a condition to recommend to city council. But if not, the current policy of how we measure building height is based on the building department and Florida Building Code definition.
And that's what I'm familiar with, and therein is problematic. To me, when a statement says 45 feet maximum height of structures, it's not interpretive. It's not subject to the building code, it's a zoning code. If this was a building code, you'd be in a traditional zoning district, you would build to the height allowed, being subject to building codes. But this is a contractual relationship in a PD. We're agreeing with your proposal, they're agreeing with us. So it's very difficult for me, quite honestly, to read a statement, to reiterate the statement. It says structural, you reiterated that when you read it, Eddie, and yet it's still subject to interpretation, and I'm not in agreement with that, I'm sorry. So if a motion comes, I may speak to some kind of a condition that at least alerts that what we're describing is a maximum structural height on the property. And the only other question is, where is it measured from? And it should be from the finished grade of whatever the finished elevation is. I don't know if you can address my question that it may be moot, your buildings are 30 feet high. I don't know.
Well, normally I would agree with you as far as finished floor elevation is your finished grade. Your FFE is where you go from. Standardly, a lot of municipalities do include, you know, what he has referred to from the top to the pitch is halfway up and things like that. To put on a maximum height of being at the pitch of the roof or any appurtenances that would go above that, not that I know. Again, I don't have the building plans yet, but I don't think that's going to be a problem, is it? We'll make it work.
That's the reason I bring this up, is it becomes a debatable subject when someone takes the opinion it's a zoning code and someone takes the opinion it's a building code. And that is somewhat problematic, and that experience teaches me enough to say I think it needs to be discussed. You're discussing it. You said that that's not going to be an issue for you, and hopefully when the plans get reviewed that are finished construction, it'll end up 45 feet above finished grade.
As long as we know what we've got to play by, we'll play by that.
And you can see the relevance of it is you've got these renderings of how you're going to try to obscure the height of the building through vegetation, and showing those illustrations again reflects what height the buildings are somewhat important to some folks, I think.
Understood.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
Will we continue on in this vein? Are we getting ready to wrap up on, I guess I'm still a little confused about, we're going to do everything at one time.
Yes, we're going to hear the applicant first, and we're going to hear those that are in favor, those are opposed, and we'll give the applicant to come back up.
Okay. I'm a little bit familiar with this property because I'm a fairly avid cyclist, and so I've passed it a number of times. I applaud your decision not to try to cross the bike path, because every single crossing of the bike path is an aggravation to a cyclist. My brother calls them velocity thieves. I also lived in that neighborhood and rode my bike around both sides of the property. Never been on the property, but it's always just struck me as being a really, really beautiful site. It's just got this kind of forest primeval sort of look to it, and the depth and the darkness and the shade and the green in there. It's just one of the great things about Florida, just this richness of growth. I am happy to see that you have such a great amount of open space, and you've got more than a quarter of the tree canopy saved. I'm impressed by that. It does seem to me that a lot of times what is touted as open space is simply a dry or a boggy, retention pond. And I guess a handful of things that I saw when I was looking at it, I know there are certain setback requirements, and every setback requirement costs money, for the people who are building. I just wish, given it's been mentioned, the native vegetation on the property and making use of what's already there as part of the code, I guess. I wish that the 3-story buildings were set back farther from the road, and I know you were trying to set them back also from the houses, so you're kind of pinched there. But it just seems to me, and of course, this is a standard thing, that the taller buildings are set back farther from the road, just through that sight line that you were talking about. But I guess I just also thought that it sure would be nice if there was a little more depth of native vegetation so that the place in essence was kind of a little more hidden and still looked like the kind of refuge that I've always seen it as. You know, time marches on and things change, but I guess that's a lot to sort of throw out there, but these are kind of all my musings on this place because I know it, kind of.
Comment heard. Comment heard.
Member, Secretary Grant.
Just one more question, please.
Yes, sir.
How do you feel about the conditions that staff has requested?
We've been over all the conditions, and I think the only thing that we still have to deal with is going to be the two driveways. That's got to.
I'm sorry, I
The
didn't
two
hear.
driveways, we
Oh,
still
okay.
have to go through a process for that, but all the conditions that have been set forth to us so far, we have no issues with.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Aton.
Just want to say I was invited to a meeting with the applicant and attended to learn a little bit more. But on the subject of the driveways, this is maybe more to staff than the applicant as it relates to, I know we've done some projects in the past where there was actually a requirement for a second gate-operated driveway for safety with ambulance and fire, first responder stuff. Is there, it seems like there's a little bit of a conflicting item here in that a second driveway, at least from that standpoint, provides additional public safety for the residents of the community and the ability for the first responders to access the property versus the current ordinance or guidelines as it relates to a single driveway for that piece of property. Is there any guidance as to how those two interact with each other?
So what you're describing, I believe, is the number of units. The number of units can trip the requirement for an additional access point. And sometimes we can work with the fire marshal to where that access point is not a typical day-to-day used access point. It's emergency only, and so that's an option as well.
If that's, is there any condition or anything desired by staff as it relates to the driveway discussion about whether that second driveway would be gated or would not be gated, or?
There's no preference, but there is an impact, like was mentioned earlier. If you're using only one access in the day-to-day, then that creates additional stacking requirements.
Member Rogers.
I was trying to find the page that had all of the sort of selling points to the people that were, the conversation with the people in the neighborhood. You mentioned at some point there was a mention of a 550 square foot minimum, and then somewhere I saw a 600 square foot minimum. Can someone speak to that? Or perhaps our staff, or
Sure.
both?
I'll just, real quick, the PD limits the minimum size of a unit to 600 square feet. So while 550 had been proposed, 600 is the minimum our code allows. And so that's one of the conditions, the
And
proposed
that's
conditions.
that's a hard figure. I mean, that's
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I 64. Page 64. I can't find it. I'll
Okay. Any other questions? Do you have anything further to say before we continue the public
I
hearing?
guess I did find.
Okay.
Sorry. I see that the three-story building that is closest, it's on the south side of the development. That is the clubhouse building, correct?
On the clubhouse building, actually, we get it back up. It would be, clubhouse would be the south and east,
Yes, correct.
south and east.
But that is where a three-story building comes closest to the buffer and the road. I suppose it being the clubhouse building, It's probably not as mobile as one of the other ones might be, and of course, it's, you've got the 3 stories. Those long rectangular buildings are all 3 stories. It's the 2 stories are up to the west, right?
Correct.
I don't, in all of your iterations where it was mentioned that you guys were moving buildings around to see what you could do to save trees, was there ever an iteration that had a 2-story building in the location of the clubhouse?
Where the clubhouse is currently?
Yes, where it currently is.
John? No, there was not. There was not.
Okay.
Through
Does
with
the
me?
applicant have anything else to say?
No, I think the questions
Okay.
have been directed. The biggest thing that I did want to say is the driveways. I appreciate that being brought up, that we know that is a part of the process that we have to go through. As somebody who dealt with that for many, many years, I like the 2 accesses because I think from a solid waste standpoint and also from public services such as fire and police, it's a better flow for a project. So that's one thing I did want to add. Anything else?
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor?
John Marling again. I think the 2 driveways are a really critical decision because you have the refuse pickup, and otherwise the garbage trucks are circulating all the way through the committee to come out and stack with the one entrance as opposed to using the other. And so we thought that over quite a bit with the architect and with Bruce Moya, our engineer. And the only other thing, Bruce, are you still here? Yeah, a couple of points that you had that were really worthwhile. I know you looked at the 2 entrances and also the irrigation and a couple other points if you had them.
Can you please speak into the microphone? Sorry.
Yes. So could Bruce, our engineer, speak on a couple of those points? It'll just take a minute.
Yeah, if it's brief. we
Thank
need
you.
it.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Bruce Moy. I'm the president of MBB Engineering. I'm the civil engineer for the project. Our address is 1250 West O'Galley Boulevard in Melbourne. I did look at some of the bullet points of why we have two entrances, and I wanted to kind of go over those real quick. So the site has almost 1,300 linear feet of frontage on Dairy Road. That's a lot. That's a quarter mile plus. The driveways are separated. They have 500 feet separation between the 2 driveways. And one thing about being a corner lot, technically this may not be a corner lot because there's a piece of DEP property between the right-of-way and this property. So technically it's not a corner. I'm sure we'll have more discussion on that with staff. And the secondary entrance is, we were strategically put the compactor there so that really it's for safety, so the trash truck doesn't have to drive through the entire development to get to pick up all the trash. They come in through the secondary entrance, it's right there, they pull in, they back out, and they go. And then in addition, if we did not have the secondary access, we'd have a 900 linear foot dead-end drive, where your code only allows for 500. So for emergency access for fire trucks and police, it made a lot of sense to have that secondary access so they can just come straight out. So those were really the points I wanted to make. If you have any questions on that, I'll answer those now.
Member Garrard.
A question for staff, if you can. The iterations that are being referred to and the public meeting you held with the residents and neighbors concerned with that, have the iterations come about from staff overviewing what the proposal is, like the 2 driveways versus 1? Have the iterations come to staff recommendations for tree protection, preservation, or are these iterations privately been done internally to your group? Has staff reviewed this and worked the plan out, so to speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And bringing the subject up regarding the engineering folks, and they've looked at the driveways and the standards by this, have they offered any feelings on, in general, what seems pretty important, 2 driveways versus 1 driveway? What's their kind of go-for feeling?
Sure. I received a response from our community development engineer, Kwabeno Ofosu. He described The application is saying the turn lane warrant analysis was conducted per NCHRP 457 and presented in Appendix L. And he says that this is the industry standard tool that we use to assess whether dedicated turn lanes are warranted. Based on their numbers, the results of the calculation is in order. He did have a couple of clarifying points on their data, but nothing that was substantial to the distinction on whether turn lanes were necessary based on those two access points that were provided.
Okay, so that goes back to my point. My question is that we look at two driveways, and it's a very significant change in your design if you only get one. And the analysis done for turning movements is done on two driveways. And the folks with our staff are in concurrence that the two driveways don't warrant turn lanes, but go to one driveway and everything changes. And so again, is it somewhere in the cards that the two driveways are leaning towards favorable opinion on the finished design? It's just a little different from what I'm familiar with. Seeing a site plan, it's really just a sketch that's not relevant for consideration on something as significant as two driveways or one driveway to an apartment complex.
Sure, again, this is the proposed concept for the planned development.
So call it 90% accurate of what we're going to see, and I'm sure with the protection you've done for the trees, they've really worked the details out, but it goes back to my one critical question more than anything is those two driveways and turning movements from Dairy Road's two-lane section. I don't know if it's appropriate, I'm sorry to continue on, is it appropriate that we might feel like two driveways feel better than one based on what we're evaluating as part of our consideration and recommendation to City Council? That would, glove would fit the hand, so to speak? Okay, thank you, Eddie.
Okay. Lori, do you have any cards?
No, sir.
No cards. In opposition or in favor?
I would like to remind the members of the audience that if you want to speak, you have to submit a card. And that was what I announced at the beginning of the meeting. There's the table over there. You have to fill it out with your name and whether you're for or against.
We'll give you time to fill out the cards.
You're not obligated to speak.
In fact, we'll let you fill out the cards later. And don't steal their rose pen.
So do we ask questions? This is my first.
First,
meeting
state your
ever.
name and where you live.
I'm Rachel Tucker. I'm at 3140 Demerit Drive, Titusville.
Okay, and that's relating to this development?
Yes.
Okay.
So my question is, I just moved in this week to Titusville, so thank you. I'm glad you guys are
Speak
all
to
here.
us, please.
Oh, sorry. So my question is, I just added it up, and if you have 134 apartments at your lowest rate of $1,473 a month for rent, that comes out to a year of you're taking out of Titusville over $2 million a year. So my question is, how do you plan to pump that back into Titusville?
So, ma'am, I'm sorry, you just have to direct your questions to them and then they can field the questions back to anyone in the audience.
Okay, could you ask them that?
What is your name again?
Rachel Tucker.
Hey, Rachel, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
So listen, affordable housing is one of my biggest concerns here as well.
Yes.
All right. There's an article that Titusville publishes called "The Talk About Titusville" or "The Talk of Titusville."
Talking points.
Talking points. And in that, you'll notice there's a lot of developments here that are coming up in and around the city or proposed developments, none of which are for affordable housing. Yes. Okay. So one of the first questions I asked, the only question I asked today, was about their rental rates, and they're not affordable.
I agree.
So my question that I would have asked them, but I'm headed up to here with new developments that come into our town that are not for the residents of this town. Mm-hmm. If you go into that talking points that you just mentioned, you'll notice there's a number of developments that far outnumber the number of people that live here. Far outnumber. So there's no way, if every development was to come to fruition, that the people of Titusville could ever live in them. None of them are of $300,000, $1,400, $1,500, $2,600 a month for rent. So that's one of my biggest points. I don't mean to ram at you, but these new developments that come into our town that are not for our residents are not for us. Okay? So, but I will ask that question. It's a great question to ask, and I will ask on your behalf.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Steve, you might as well not sit down. I saw you give her the card.
Good evening. Steve Bridges, Titusville. Don't ruin my address for obvious reasons, Joe. So I did have some questions, but my biggest concern here, although I'm not going to be as eloquent as the traffic engineer was, is traffic. If you live in the area and travel Dairy Road, I think you know what I'm talking about. We have 3 schools, 2 right on Dairy, 1 at high school around the corner. And while I appreciate the fact that he gave numbers out, you also have a development going on JJ Road of 143 units, which is nearby the intersection of Dairy and US 1. 1 or 2 entrances on Dairy Road is, I think, irrelevant to the fact that all those cars are going to be pouring out onto Dairy Road, a 2-lane road, near an intersection with a light. And I understand we now have in the city the intersection of Dairy and US 1, which, if you look at the statistics, I think there's been several traffic homicides there already in the last few years. Living right off of Dairy Road, getting onto Dairy Road has become a nightmare at certain times of the day. And we're going to add another 1,000 trips, is what I think I heard today, or 999. I think that, and I was hoping some other residents in the area would speak, but I think that's going to be problematic unless infrastructure improvements are made to the road. 4-laning it, turn laning it, whatever you got to do. And I think that when you're going to, what I would be opposed to is the medium density or anything higher. I think lower density would be appropriate for the area. That's what is there already surrounding the given property we're talking about. So the only other question I have at this point would be the community meetings probably weren't well attended because they don't reach out far enough. I think there's an arbitrary number of 200 yards.
500 feet, I think it is.
What is it?
500 feet.
Oh, that's not even,
right?
not as good as what I thought it was.
Eddie, is that right?
Yes, sir,
500 feet? Yeah. Okay.
Which doesn't reach a lot of residents when you're talking about an undeveloped property. So that said, that probably needs to be changed so that more residents in a localized area can have input at the community meeting before we come and tie up your time here. And again, those would be my points. I think all the others were answered, including the access points. So,
Thank you. Any other cards?
No more cards.
Okay. Anybody else want to fill out a card? No. Okay.
Chairman, can I just jump in real quick to ask the applicants who spoke to also fill out a card as well and present it to Lori when you get a chance? Thank you.
Does the applicant have any final thing to say?
John Marlin again. The impact fees, part of this development, are $761,045 for one-time impact fee. The real estate taxes per year are estimated at $432,630. Now, all that money, some of that money goes to Brevard County, but quite a bit of it goes to schools in the town. Thank you.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing.
Oh, no, I want to ask him a question.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Member Faison.
Yeah, you got off me. Yeah, I like that. Hey, listen, I do the same thing if I were you. Trust me. All right, so listen. So I understand that these developments aren't cheap. Okay, they're not. But her point wasn't what the city gets out of it. Her point was what do the residents get out of your property. And as I said before, and you know, there's a number of properties that are proposed to build here in our town. Many of them are not from Titusville, and they take the money and they run. Okay, but yet the median income of our town, and you know this because I know you've done the numbers, is about $60,000. They can't afford this. And no one is building for the people that can afford this.
our opinion is that there's about 1,000 jobs right now where the average salary would be $93,000. And we have other projects where two wage earners making $45,000 a year can afford the apartment. The only other option that we saw, that we kind of looked at, you could do a complete affordable project. But I don't think that's right for what's going on right now in Titusville and the jobs and the growth of the community.
I'm sorry. Now, I don't mean to.
I hear what you're saying.
I like to have a conversation, so I don't mean to interrupt you, right?
No.
But when you say what's not right for what's going on right now in the city of Titusville, right now in the city of Titusville is enough development for those jobs, for those wage earners that you just spoke of, 90,000, 150,000. There's enough development for them. They're good. What's not right is that there's no development for those $45,000 wage earners. That's what's not right. So when you say what's not right for Titusville, that's not really what you meant to say, or at least I don't take it that way. What I really meant, what I heard you say is, it's not right for the developers. It's not right for them to make the kind of earnings that they could one way. But thanks to Governor DeSantis, come July 1st, all that changes. Am I not right?
You are absolutely
okay.
Right.
So with that being said, so since Governor DeSantis changed all the rules for you wonderful developers, why not make this development, which won't start till after January 1st, after July 1st,
right.
Why not make this development one of the first kind to be affordable housing?
Maybe that's a good idea.
Because I promise you, you'll still make your money. Do you not agree?
I haven't really, to be honest with you, fully investigated the new ordinance. It's been talked about a lot. And I think if you do a really good job, whether it's at an affordable end or at a high end or in the middle, you're going to do well. We're close. We don't know what the good commission is going to say, either the zoning, planning and zoning, or the city council. We're closing on this property next week. And we're closing on the property for a good reason. We think we can read situations pretty well. And there might be a lot of rebuttal, but we're talking about a really nice development that I think is affordable to a number of the residents. I mean, we have developments where you have somebody working at a 7-Eleven on a moderate salary, and you have somebody else working in construction, and they do fine. We're not trying to overcharge for the units.
I get that, because number one, I do appreciate at least you didn't say $2,000. on your low end, so I do appreciate that. Okay, but if you and your team get spun up, and I'm sure that you have some great smart people, right, on this new affordable housing that Governor DeSantis has put in place, there's opportunities and there's plenty of places to make the same kind of, if not better, money building affordable houses for our folks that truly desperately need it, especially in this community. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Before you leave, I just want to say one thing, and you might reply back to it. We've developed a tree ordinance, and we've seen many site plans that show a lot of trees, but they don't happen. When they come before us in city council and the digging begins, they clear cut them. So let me see, do you state that you'll basically live by the plan submitted?
Very definitely. After $33,000 in surveying and Susan's help and Bruce Moya's help, we're going to save every single tree we can, and we're going to get it over the 25% canopy.
This is being recorded, so.
Yep. Nope. We're not here to cut down the trees, and we're not here to build the property and sell the property. We're here to stay for a long time.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
I think if you just want to get a feel for how people on this board and maybe some of them in this room feel about this tree issue, if you go up to where Garden Street crosses 95, just on the kind of northwest corner there, it used to be kind of covered with trees, and now it looks like Saudi Arabia. And I think that's kind of everybody. I think they feel like, fooled me once, shame on you. Fooled me twice, shame on me. But I was just, again, what I would love to see, and is a little bit bigger setback and a little more saving the native vegetation, and maybe a little bit smaller building size near the road. But I was just curious, regarding affordable housing, from a developer standpoint, do you make more money on a larger unit than you do on the same space allotted over several smaller units?
You tend to do a little better. The tendency is to go to smaller units now. I think the average unit size in DeBarlo all across the country has gone from 1,100 feet to 1,000 feet to 900 feet, some of them 850.
Right, yeah.
Very few one-bedroom units are unoccupied.
Right. And so, these things that you're planning, will they be studio apartments, basically all just kind of one big room with a little separate bathroom area or kitchen?
Well, the 600 foot is a good benchmark, and we'll live by the 600 feet on those few units for sure. But you can set up really nice 600 foot units. I mean, the garage is about 420 square feet, so you're a couple hundred feet larger, so there's room for the kitchenette, there's room for the sleeping alcove and still the dining and stuff.
I just think people are getting used to that idea, and I know it's, you're right, it's not affordable housing exactly, but as has been said, a couple of earners, wage earners, and if you're at $1,500, well, it's $750 each a month, and it's not so bad. But I don't know, just obviously, you're a businessman and you're in this to make money, but I just, for the purposes of housing in this area, if you would make the same amount or maybe a little more with a larger number of smaller units, and perhaps that's worth considering. The one other thing I wanted to say was, my dad's an architect, and I really think you've done a nice job on the plans, and in general, it seems to me that, you all are trying to do fairly right by the site and what you've got there. I hope that you can save every single tree, because I just don't understand, this, I don't understand this kind of knock it all down thing. Maybe it's an insurance thing. Maybe people are afraid it's going to fall in their car, their building. I don't know, but they're all gone.
It's cheaper.
But it's not as nice.
It's not as nice. You're absolutely right.
I mean, I grew up in Winter Park, and, those trees over there are, pieces of them always come down in hurricanes, but everybody puts up with them because it's just so beautiful. And I have to think that at some point that has some knock-on effect to what people are willing to pay to live there. Thank you.
Mr. Faison.
Thank you. Thank you for your frankness and your honesty.
That's it.
Good.
And with that, I will close the public hearing. I've got a question, Chelsea. Vice Chairman Aton, will you repeat, you were invited to a meeting where this whole development, you're briefed on this whole development, is that correct? Correct. We've never had that in the past.
Can you elaborate? What was the meeting? Who called the meeting? Where was it?
It was at Durango's, and I was invited by the applicant and their representative, Mr. Fisher, just to learn more about the project.
Did you form an opinion?
No,
What did you learn at the meeting?
pretty much the same thing we learned here.
So by his disclosure, he has eliminated any bias that he may have obtained from that meeting.
Okay.
Does anyone have any?
There was nothing included in the meeting that wasn't part of the packet and part of what is covered here tonight.
Thank you for your disclosure.
Okay. Any other comments or questions of the staff? Okay, as I understand, we have to have 3 different motions. Is anyone prepared for the first motion?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Concerning the annexation, I recommend we approve annexation of 3.5 acre parcel having Brevard County Property Appraiser parcel number 21-35-29-00-8. Do we have to vote on that at one time? Okay.
Is there a second of the motion?
I second.
Any discussion? Mr. Perez, I see your light on. No, I think it's Lori. Okay, roll call, Lori?
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Second motion.
I'll make a motion on the small-scale comprehensive plan amendment, number 11, 2022, for approval, recommendation approval of the city council.
Is there a second of the motion?
Second.
It's been seconded by Secretary Grant. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Faison,
No.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Member Rogers,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. And a third motion?
Before you move on, could Mr. Faison state his basis for the no vote?
Yes. As our city starts to take notice and record of how many developments that were coming, we need to start encouraging more affordable housing.
Okay, anyone prepared to make the third motion?
I'd like to make the motion on the ordinance.
Member Garad.
Ordinance number 5-1993 and ordinance 29-2016, changing the zoning district to planned unit development or plan development. But I would also add the recommendation to city council regarding the two driveway discussion we had and that I was focused on, that it would appear from the information provided to me in their application that the argument is certainly more favorable to two driveways than one. And I'd like to forward that to city council.
Anyone second the motion?
Second.
Any more
Do
discussion?
we need to mention the conditions?
Yeah.
Chairman, I'd like to add for clarification, is that including the conditions of approval on page 48 that staff had included, such as the maximum of 138 residential units, a minimum size of 600 square feet? There's a paragraph there towards the lower half of the page.
Yes, I apologize. I should have incorporated that into that motion. Yes, thank you.
Does the second accept those?
Yes.
Okay,
So-
any discussion?
Just
Mr.
to be sure, so we're voting to approve this plan, or we're just voting for this third motion?
So to clarify, this is a motion to approve the change in the zoning to plan development.
Okay.
Which includes adopting the concept plan that's provided tonight with the conditions that staff has provided on page 48 and the additional condition by member Garad.
Two driveways.
So if I still have an issue with building height or setbacks, then I would, if I vote yes, then I'm approving things as they stand here.
Yes, nothing different from what you see on paper.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
No.
Member Rogers,
No?
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. When will city council hear this? Next meeting, next week, or?
Did you want to state your basis for your no vote?
I'm just not completely comfortable that the finishing touches have been put on regarding the recreational kind of paths. And I'm still a little uneasy about the setbacks. I realize that there's a 20-foot setback requirement, or at least that's the minimum, and they're meeting that. I guess I think it's a really nice project potentially, and I guess I just am tired of the, projects that meet the minimums. I mean, I think this is not one in general, but I guess I'd like to see it just tweaked a little bit.
Chairman, to answer your question, this will be heard by City Council on June 13th.
June 13th. Okay. Next item. 9C.
Item 9C begins on page 288. Verona Village C is a proposed 536-lot single-family subdivision on approximately 184.86 acres. Actually, I'll wait until the room clears a little bit.
Okay.
I'll remind anyone who spoke, if you haven't filled out a card already, please hand one in to our recording secretary at the far end. If you have already spoke and if you plan on speaking on the next item, fill out a card.
Okay, Eddie, proceed.
Thank you. Verona Village C is a proposed 536 lot single-family subdivision on approximately 184.86 acres located west of Verona Village D subdivision and south of Verona Village B subdivision. The overall Verona development, formerly known as Willow Creek, consists of 675 plus or minus acres. In 2016, the remaining portion of the development, excluding Phase 1, was rezoned to the PUDZ to allow for an additional 1,277 residential units and 172 acres of commercial and light industrial use. The submittal requirements for a sketch plat are listed in Section 11 of the Development Review Procedures Technical Manual. The staff report that follows that identifies all of the sections, 11.1.1, 11.1.2, continuing on, has been updated. And Laura, you have copies to hand out to the members, correct? We have it in your agenda star, but we also have the hard copies that Lori can pass out. We've updated the staff report to provide more clarity on where you can find the information, some of the page numbers, so that you can make those connections. Apologies for the oversight on the staff report. And then for the purposes of the commission's discussion, page 294 of 338 includes the overall site drawing. So you can see the lots and the configuration of the subdivision.
Any questions of the staff?
What's he talking about?
Item 9C, Verona Village. Mr. Grodd.
A question for staff. In traffic analysis, again, seems to be my day for this. The plan illustrates extremely long lengths of residential streets uninterrupted by any type of calming device other than cars that may prefer to park on the street. And those excessive lengths tend to attract people to speed. That's a simple fact. Has there been any analysis by staff or traffic staff regarding the design in these extensive lengths of local streets?
So I did ask our community development engineer about that question, and his response was that design speed and geometry do limit lengths of curves. However, we do not have limits on straightaway sections. We can reach out to the developer to consider reducing straightaway lengths by inserting curves and or reducing the posted speed limit. So that is an option. So it is understood that long straight lines can encourage speeding. And so those are some of the ways that it can be addressed. But our code does not prohibit that long of a stretch.
Perhaps a code needs to be examined since we're aware that it does attract traffic speeds. I guess I would ask the question in terms of the right-of-way section they're showing. It's a 50-foot residential street, curb and gutter, so it's going to be rather difficult to insert some type of traffic calming device. What comes to mind is at each of the intersections at those residential street intersections throughout that lengthy straight, I believe they would be ideally developed if they were to put a traffic calming device into the intersection, which would effectively be called a roundabout, but it's not. It can be squeezed in the 50 feet of right-of-way. It doesn't disrupt that design. It simply slows the traffic down and prevents someone from going. And I actually looked at that for distances, and if you were to put each of those intersections with a calming device in there, i.e. a roundabout as it would be called, that would certainly impede traffic speeds and probably make the community a little quieter than speeding cars down it. So I certainly look forward to somebody maybe looking at that code if we're aware that it creates a problem where we don't have a solution to it somewhere down the road. Thank you.
Member Rogers.
There was somewhere I ran across in here something about we're trying to avoid sprawl. Can you define sprawl for me? There was a definition in here somewhere, but it was something like, something that required, it was too far out, and it required too many city services, and I don't remember where I saw it.
Page 54,
How do you do that?
Control F.
He's a computer guy. So where is it?
Control F, and then type sprawl.
Well, I'm already there now.
Just so we're all on the same page, this is number 5, item number 5 on page 54.
Right.
And it says, one of the review criteria is the extent to which the amendment will not result in a sprawl development pattern as determined by Chapter 163 Florida statutes and will not discourage infilling of more appropriate areas available for development within existing development area boundaries. And the staff comment reads, the subject property is bounded by vacant commercial.
Actually, this is the wrong property, isn't it?
This is.
Oh, right, okay. That is, yeah. So I guess I'm just questioning, this has obviously been approved already and got started already, but, is this not sprawl?
Actually, let me go back and explain the process. So
Okay.
what this item is a sketch plat. So the first step in creating a subdivision is to request, get approval from city council for a sketch plat. Your sketch plat is your preliminary concept of the layout of the subdivision. So that way we can determine whether the roads are appropriate, the buffers, things like that. The next stage is called the preliminary plat. So again, we start with the sketch plat. Once that's approved, you move to engineering phase, which is your preliminary plat and your site plan. Those are administrative processes. And then once the engineering has been done in the subdivision, the final plat has to be approved by city council, which is when any public roads get turned over to the city and the subdivision is deemed complete so that you can build the homes within the subdivision. So this is the first step in the subdivision. This subdivision is part of a larger master planned area called Verona Willow Creek. And so this is one of the villages, one of the subdivisions within that larger master planned area.
So when we vote on this, if we approve it, we're not approving everything in it, we're just approving the kind of general concept, but this will all be worked out like, I don't know, their tree plan or something like that? We're not approving that?
Correct.
Member Faison.
The 40-foot frontage minimum lot width, and that's going to be on 294 over to the side. Was that something that was pre-agreed to? $295. Right side in the legend.
I found that. I was looking for one other section, which is the approved master plan for the area. So I believe it had the dimensions described on there as well.
Is the standard dimension?
Wait a minute.
It's on the
After
slide.
Mr. Faison, if he's through, school board member Gilbert is the next person.
All right, let me just finish up with this.
So the page that I'm looking at is page 316,
Okay.
and that's the overall concept plan for the subdivision, for the overall master planned area. And in if you zoom in on the first column of text, it says the residential component will contain a variety of housing based upon market demands. The minimum proposed lot width is 40 feet with 5-foot side yard setbacks and a minimum 10 feet of building separation.
All righty, so this is proposed. All right, and again, these developers coming into our town, proposing smaller lots, are turning this place into a place I don't want to live in. I don't want people thinking they come to Titusville and have to live in such small squalor. Is there a process for us to increase minimum lot width. Now, I do understand that that means they can't put in 500 some odd homes because lot sizes have now increased. But do we have that latitude to either request or deny based on lot width this in in our town? I think 50 feet is already small enough. I think 75 feet, 80 feet foot frontage is what Titusville deserves, because that makes us look like someplace somebody wants to live, not 40-foot frontage like inner city row houses. 40-foot frontage is just, it's ridiculous to put a house on such a small lot, in my opinion, but I don't want that in my town. So the question I have to you is, do we have a mechanism to require these developers to put in larger yards or larger frontages?
My understanding is that no, based on the approved master plan, granting them the opportunity to provide 40-foot lots.
That was a mistake, in my opinion.
You can also make a recommendation that council change the code in the bigger picture.
Thank you.
Member Gilbert.
I noticed that there wasn't a school concurrency application in the packet. I didn't see it. Is it too premature for that, or is that something that needs to be done?
Yeah, I think it was too.
I thought it had been done, but let me check the requirements for a sketch plat to see.
Those people are probably debating in the hall. They wouldn't say anything.
I don't see specifically school concurrency listed. The applicant might be able to provide some more information if they have reached out to the school board about a preliminary assessment.
Might have been done in the original plan.
In 2016, perhaps?
Yeah, the master plan.
Possible.
Okay, I could also reach out to the board rep and see if they've received it as well. Thank you.
Member Childs.
Did we hear something about this earlier this year about this development?
Yes.
What was that? What was that about?
Yeah, different sections.
It was just a different section, but it was a sketch plat too. Was that or?
I believe what you're talking about is the final plat for one of the other villages.
For one of the other ones, it was
Mhm.
okay, and yeah, I don't remember, but did we cover the firefighting like this? Are we requiring another firefighting area down here because this is a lot of houses, right? So we're gonna have go ahead.
Right. The applicant's been working with the authority having jurisdiction which is our fire marshal, on whether there's going to be sprinklers in the homes or additional setbacks. And so the applicants can speak more on what they've been
So
discussing.
they might do more sprinklers because there's so many and they're further away from a firehouse or something like that?
Well, the response
like
time
the
is longer.
mitigating type stuff. Okay.
As I understand it, there's going to be a new fire station somewhere near the police department.
That's
on
correct.
Grissom.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Member Rogers.
So I just was, is this some minimum 10 feet building separation with 5-foot side yard setbacks? Is that standard? It seems really tight.
Standard for our residential zoning districts? No, that's much narrower than our usual side setbacks.
But it got approved because, why?
That's a good question. As part of the master plan, they're allowed to negotiate, and so that was included as part of the approval.
Wow. All right. I just wanted to call attention to the tree survey on page 314, and I hate to sound like Johnny One Note, but it's 314. if you kind of zoom out to about 33%, and just look at all that red. I get it that, obviously if there's a tree in the middle of the road, you got to take it out. And I suppose if there's one in the middle of a,
I think. Yeah.
it's just that, the light gray is stuff that's definitely going to stay. The black is, well, they'll try to save it if they can. And the red is just, it's just covered with blood, this map. And do we have any control over that?
So I'll highlight several of the, we didn't realize that there was a lot of impacts to trees, and so we worked with the applicant to identify some tree preservation tracts where some of the largest clusters or largest trees are located. And so you'll see on the south side next to lots 106 and 107, there's about 3 or 4 lots there that were removed from development in order to provide that tree preservation tract.
Right.
And then there's additional tree preservation on the north of that between lots 42 and 43.
I appreciate that, Eddie. It's just, that seems like a really small victory, just compared to, I even think about, I've been in places where, there was like a really nice oak tree and they split the road around it, and it's a traffic calming device and it's beautiful. They do that some in Louisiana where I lived, north of Lake Pontchartrain. I don't know. It's like a gentleman said here. It's cheaper. Knock them all down. And I don't know. If the planning and zoning, board doesn't have any control over that, what are we here for? Well, okay, there's other stuff, but I hate to see all that red. And the other thing was on page 315, these trails that are laid out. What I think I see, the 10-foot pathway simply follows the road. The big chunk that's the path on this is just the road, or it's a giant sidewalk next to the road. And then they've got this little, blue, the 8-foot pathway is blue, and then you've got neighborhood connections, and you've got a stone path. But when you actually go chase down those colors, they're tiny. What you have here is simply a car-based, in my opinion, piece of sprawl. Once you get in here, you're trapped in your car. There's no reason to get out. They've got what? They've got like, 3 interpretive boards and a floating fountain, and then you can ride along the road on your bicycle or jog. I don't know. I find I'm really underwhelmed by that much land with that little natural access and paths. And is there anything more that we can request on that?
Sure. So as part of your recommendation to council, you could recommend that additional amenities be added.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion before I open the public hearing?
Well, I did have one more question, I guess. I'm sorry.
Okay, state it.
Does this fit the definition, in your mind, does this fit the definition of sprawl?
It's hard to say because sprawl can also mean encouraging further or future development outside of the development boundaries, and this is within our city's urban service area. So we can provide utilities to this area. Usually sprawl is when you have to provide utilities that dead end to an area that would no longer receive city utilities and continue more of a leapfrogging pattern, whereas this was already approved at a larger conceptually it was approved as one large village of villages. And so it kind of serves as it's got an internal clubhouse in a previous village D, which is to the east of Village C. So in some ways, but I understand that it's also very much auto-oriented.
Yeah, I don't know, it seems like it's a bit of product of the past.
Okay, at this point, I'll open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to speak first? Is it sprawl?
By the definition, no, I don't interpret this as sprawl.
Give your
But my
name
name
and
is
address.
Brian Ashby. I'm with Kimley Horn, address 189 South Orange Avenue, Suite 1000, in Orlando, Florida. As Eddie mentioned, this is the third phase of the master plan community known as Verona. Village D has come before you previously, Village B, and now we're into Village C. We were to talk about the kind of the long stretches of roads. We will have stop signs and stop bars as appropriate. Traffic calming devices, that's something that we can definitely investigate and use. I've done those personally on a project that we're doing in Apopka right now with some, not roundabouts, but traffic circles, or small little oval, just something where you have to pay attention, otherwise you're going to run into a raised curb, right? So that's something we can certainly look into on the applicability of along some of these longer stretches, especially on that south end, I think is probably more so where you were looking at. So we can certainly look into that as we move forward with the actual final engineering of that. Regarding the trees, yeah, we worked, I think this sketch plat's been about a year in the making. We've worked with staff quite a bit with the trees, looking at, again, clusters of tree tracks because the site has to be raised so much because it is so low lying and we need to have stormwater area. It's difficult to preserve some of those trees with the critical root zone. When we raise the site, we have to stay away from those trees. So that becomes difficult. So we were working with staff to figure out where it made the most sense along the boundaries where we have wetlands. One thing to note about large trees, especially specimen or heritage trees, they're mostly found in the upland areas. So all the wetlands that we are trying to preserve don't have the massive trees that the uplands do. So if you look at the tree survey and then you look at our site plan, you'll see where we're preserving wetlands and where those trees are located. The large trees are located either right on the edge of the wetland or all within the uplands. So we've tried to do our best to work with it while also still getting, we won't even come close to the density that we are allowed, but maintaining what was originally in the conceptual master plan itself. So that's kind of one of the reasons you see a lot of the trees being impacted. Again, it's because it's more in the uplands and we're preserving quite a bit of wetlands in this. We only have a very small portion of wetland impacts that are isolated around the development. Right now, just to give you an idea, the overall Verona development, which is plus or minus 600 and some odd acres, we were required to provide 224 acres of open space. With these first three phases, and we still have another 100 acres of a fourth phase to go, we are currently sitting at 212 acres of open space. So we're about 12 acres short of the total open space that's required by the master plan for the entire development. In Village A, which is the fourth phase, which will be coming shortly, right now, conceptually, we're looking at about another 60 to 70 acres of open space. So we are going to far exceed the open space requirement that was in the master plan itself by, we're looking in the range of about 50 acres of additional open space that was never contemplated in that master plan. So we're trying to work with the natural environment that we have, provide that open space, provide that connectivity through some of these open spaces. You talked about the trail network. One of the difficult things is we have permitted wetland boundaries and impacts through the Army Corps that were permitted years ago. And so pushing trails through some of these wetlands is a wetland impact, and we're trying to avoid wetland impacts everywhere we can. The current trail that's shown along Willow Creek Boulevard, that was already approved and built with Village B, the entire extent of that trail. And from there, we are providing the pedestrian connectivity to the other subdivisions through these road connections as they come in with Village C and Village A, while also providing pocket parks, which again were not anticipated in the master plan, but we are providing those as well as well as those tree tracks. Overall, we've been working with staff and Eddie for about a year on this one, I would say, at least. And I think I personally feel this is a really good plan. I think we've done a really good job of trying to work with the natural environment. If you ever have the opportunity, go drive through Verona. If you haven't driven through there already, especially Village B, which is getting built now. The majority of the homes either back up to wetlands or a water body. There aren't many back-to-back lots like you see in a lot of really dense, we'll call it, Winter Garden or over there in Horizon West, where you have back-to-back homes literally everywhere, blocks of them. This is a really, really unique neighborhood where you get to enjoy the natural environment. I was on a site visit last Friday, and a deer came walking out as we were taking pictures of one of the stormwater ponds that was getting built. And so personally, I think it's a really great neighborhood for Titusville. It preserves a lot of the natural environment that Titusville is known for, and I'm here to take any questions.
Okay, let's see. Member Garrard.
I was going to ask you a question since, as I was discussing this earlier with staff, that on the one hand, they can recognize that a lot of communities establish standards by which you eliminate long, lengthy residential streets that attract speeders, and that would be something, as the attorney recommended, that we should advise city council. They might want to look at that code to establish it. My question to you, since you are the consultant, you work in other jurisdictions, and you've worked in other jurisdictions that this templated 50-foot lot, back-to-back development lot, not the nice one with the deer, but this one, that those extensive length residential streets in some communities are addressed through design, either at the intersections with the intersecting streets where they bulb out the right-of-way so they can install a proper traffic calming device. And these devices vary, as you mentioned, a couple. You're familiar with that in other communities having established such a standard within their codes?
Yeah, well, one in particular, there's actually only one that I can think of that has it in their code, and we actually developed their code for them. Kimley Horn did, and that's the city of Apopka. They just adopted that within the past year, but we helped develop a manual for them that has different traffic calming devices that it's kind of a palette, right, where you can open it up and see what kind of fits within a certain development, whether that's, a traffic circle or a chicane, right, or something like that, just to deter any speeding. I will say there is a lot of curves and stuff, which does help with that a lot, and that's one thing that when we analyzed for the city of Apopka, any sort of jog in the road significantly helps folks slow down. Like you said, instead of having that long straight, in this development, we do have a lot of jogs like that because of the natural environment. But yes, very familiar. And if city staff wants to put something like that together, I'm sure it would be very welcome.
I certainly appreciate your candidness in that aspect, that there are codes out there that address it, because it is something that needs to be addressed. As other council members recognize, I hesitate from my experience, but this is what more likely is your future in development tense. This is very standard, common looking 50-foot lot. What occurs here, and I made that comment earlier about cars parking on the street, I could spin off a few named subdivisions, but that's not necessary. When you have this density caused by small lot designs, you talked about affordable housing, multiple breadwinners in one home, the first thing that generates is excessive cars. I've seen the city's standard of how you're trying to address car parking with garages, but generally speaking, these products like this tend to have excessive on-street parking caused by the fact you've got multiple breadwinners driving cars, and the streets become clogged. In fact, in the city of St. Cloud, it got to be serious enough where fire trucks couldn't pass through the streets. And I would imagine you're shaking your head because you've heard of things like that occurring, where then the city council wants to address it by widening residential rights of way. Instead of 50 feet, make them 80 feet. And then you have plenty of room to have car parking. All those iterations are things that will occur in the long run of projects with small lot development with these long, lengthy streets. It's as natural as it's going to be. I believe it's very important that you and staff work together to try to eliminate what's going to be a potential impact in that neighborhood, which can be eliminated even within those 50 feet right-of-ways effectively without creating a problem for the city, such as maintenance. There's always a foreboding by city staff not to accept landscaping roundabouts, so to speak, that then become a maintenance nightmare. There is a number of designs available. I certainly would recommend, and I would certainly request that in considering this sketch plan, that we at least let city council have an idea to have city staff perhaps address this in the future as a code, but more importantly, try to address this in that long, lengthy, is it called Temecula Circle? I think that's the name of your street, at least that's what it looks like.
Yep.
And it's the east-west road in
Yeah,
the design,
Temecula.
and it's that
Yeah.
link that goes between I gotta blow this thing up, I apologize. I think it's the intersecting of Sahara Avenue point all the way down to probably the curve. Once you leave that, the roads are curvilinear, and that's also a traffic calming design. So I was only concerned with the 1,340 feet, quarter-mile length you got in that one residential street. And I think you could easily design something within that that would eliminate the potential straight-through speeding. That's my end of my questions. Thank you.
Member Rogers.
You're a civil engineer, is that your?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you just mentioned about the wetland impact. I was out at Celebration a couple weekends ago, which is vaguely creepy, actually, Celebration. But anyway, they have quite a number of boardwalks that go through kind of hydric hammocks or whatever they're called. And is that something that, that this is a KB Homes project, right?
Yep.
The whole thing.
Yes, sir.
So is that something that might be possible, or are the kind of, I don't know, environmental impact fees on that, do they make it not possible?
Elevated boardwalks are still, because of all the construction that has to happen to actually put those in,
Yeah.
you still get the full impact. You still have to pay for, or not pay, but we'd have to, it would be very
Study and
difficult with
permit
us. Well, it's not even a study. It'd be very difficult for us because we have an Army Corps jurisdictional determination that says what we can and cannot impact. And so that's what we've had to work within those boundaries.
Okay, and just to be clear, so this entire development, all of these are 40-foot lots?
No, it's a mix of 40s, 50s, and there's even like the corner lots are wider than that.
Okay. Village C is mostly 40, or you're saying 40s and 50s in Village C?
40s and 50s in Village C. Village B and D were majority 50-foot lots.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Faison.
Commissioner Garrett, thank you for that. You gave some really good information to pass on to the city about these lots and safety on the roadway. With these 40-foot lots and two-family homes, parking is going to be an issue, and parking on the street is going to be an issue. And I believe, sitting up to the city, that 40-foot lots may not be the best thing for this. And since you guys have already made 50-foot lots before anyway, so putting 50-foot lots, a minimum in Village C, sounds like a good idea. So how many homes have you guys already built up to this point?
I can get you that number. Well, I can't tell you how many have been built. I can tell you how many have been approved up through plat.
Well,
so I don't know which ones have foundations poured and are built today. I'm the civil engineer, not the builder. But
fair enough.
I can tell you. Here we go. In Village D, it was 72 lots.
Okay.
And in Village B, it is 173 lots.
Okay, and so Village D and Village B have already begun.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
They are under Village D is pretty much fully constructed. Village B is in construction right now.
Okay, and then Village C, you guys are proposing 500 some odd.
It's a much bigger area. Yes.
Okay, alrighty. And again, price is always a good thing. So these homes are being sold for about how much?
I do not know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do, because I've been there.
Okay.
And I've asked, and they're not affordable. It's just so that you know, they're not affordable. So they're 300 and plus, and upward up to $400,000 homes on a 40-foot frontage.
Well, those are all 50s so far.
Yep, those are all 50s.
Yeah, and so one of the reasons for the 40s is to provide a little bit more diversity in the house in what's being provided out there, to be able to help with that price point. With a 40-foot wide lot, it's a little bit smaller of a home, a little bit more affordable.
Has the price of construction gone down?
It's actually leveled out from what we've seen. Some things have gone down, like RCP pipe. That's gone down quite a bit.
Okay.
Some things are still high. it's varying right now.
All right, because I went about a year ago, and when I went about a year ago, there were 320, 325. All right, for about an 1,800 square foot home. I don't think the prices have gone down significantly. That a 40-foot or 45-foot frontage is going to make that big of a difference. Okay, I like Member Garot's suggestion of passing to the city that these 40-foot lots may actually end up incurring the city a larger cost than what they're going to get from your impact fees. So, Member Garot, thank you for that information.
Anything else?
Oh.
Do you have anything else to present to us?
Not today, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor? Lori, are the cards?
I have no cards.
Nobody wants to talk tonight.
If you want to talk, you can turn it in now.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time. My question, or my comment is about trees in general.
If it's not a specific comment about this project, then you speak after this item on petitions and requests.
Yeah. Anybody else want to be recognized from the audience? For or against? Okay, at this point, I'll close the public hearing. Any further questions of the staff or any further questions at all? Mr. Faison.
This is for us here on the dais. Too often we rubber stamp proposals coming through here without thinking about our community. And then we understand that the county commissioner, excuse me, our city councilman will do whatever that they want to do. I think that we have enough projects or programs or building whatever on the books that we don't need any more rubber stamping going forward from here on out. Okay, so let's approve. I suggest to all of us, right? Let's only vote for stuff that really, really makes a good impact on the city of Titusville. That makes it someplace that you want to live. Because I can tell you, a 40-foot frontage, I don't want to live there.
Yeah, but I would say that millennials like smaller lots, as well as seniors, such as most of us, like smaller lots.
Why'd you look my way when you said
Because I think you're the same age as I am. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call, please. Motion, please.
I'll stick my comment into the motion. I want to make sure I got the right number here in this. I would recommend to City Council that we approve the sketch plat for Verona Village C. But I also want to twofold place a further recommendation to City Council that they establish at least a review of their design standards for local streets to create traffic calming improvements to prevent what does not appear to be in their code currently, where long, lengthy residential street lengths are just by design allowed. And with the comment also that the applicant has spoken, I guess I could say affirmatively, that they're familiar with implementing traffic calming measures at lengthy residential streets. Those alternatives should be explored and possibly presented to City Council when you hear this. And I'll close that as a recommendation. As short as it could be.
That's a long motion.
Well, hold on. I'd just like to add to increase the minimum lot width from the current 40-foot to 50-foot.
You're not making that as a condition of this motion?
Yes.
So I don't believe that that's legally possible. I may have to defer to Chelsea on that, but because the Verona or Willow Creek master plan was approved allowing 40-foot lots, if you now say that they cannot have 40-foot lots, then that could be a
You're
taking.
inconsistent. Anyone second the motion made by Member Gary?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chairman Aton. Any other discussion? you have anything further to say? Your light's still on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Roll call, please.
Whoops.
Oh, yes, Tom.
Just coming back to, the part of the discussion that had to do with the parking, considering the small lot and the fact that there's a good chance there's going to be 2 cars per lot, and the effect of that on safety and, the actual developments. Longevity, or realistically, is it going to be a good thing?
Well, as I understand, I may be wrong, but I think member Garrett pointed out in his long motion that the council take a look at that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
To speak to that, the brief motion would be that the applicant should, at the time, present some traffic calming examples to city council to perhaps at least illustrate that it can be done. It's up to the city council to decide the fate of your subdivision. With what you're speaking of tonight, it's a longer range question. It's kind of like affordable housing we're going to get into. This is the stuff that you can see. I quickly called up a subdivision I'm familiar with, and you can see the cars parked over the residential sidewalks, parked on the street, both sides. Take a 20-foot lane and put 2 cars on it. You got one through the middle. It calms traffic real well, but it doesn't look so good. This is something that Titusville needs to address, because this is more typically what you see being built in Florida now, across the state. So I think it perhaps would work out to address this at city council. That's the main thrust of what I'm hoping to get them to think about.
Member Rogers.
Have we passed along in some way officially that we'd like to have the commission kind of review 40-foot lots? And what's the
I
mechanism?
believe that additional condition was withdrawn.
I can't make it.
No, yeah, I know it can't be changed now, that, it's already been approved, but I'm just saying, how do we pass on a suggestion to the council to review whether 40-foot lots should be permitted in the future?
So in our existing zoning districts, like the R1C zoning district, that's our single-family high-density zoning district, the minimum lot width, I believe, is 65. So we typically don't allow lots that are less than that size.
Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Member Perez? Member Rogers?
Yes.
Member Garad?
Yes.
Member Faison?
No.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. When will this be heard at city council?
Hold on, I'm gonna give Chelsea a reason why.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so the reason why, number one, 40-foot lots begin to make Titusville look like squalor. Number two, the potential for dual income homes having too many cars and having to park on the roadway, causing additional hazard and or possibly preventing emergency services from reaching someone in need.
Chairman, to answer your question, the city council will hear this sketch plat at their May 23rd meeting.
Next week. Next item is citizens to be heard. I think they call it that. Petitions and requests from the public present. Anybody want to say anything? I don't think you have to turn in a card.
I'm Maria Hilton, 3100 Demerit Drive. I have a question for Member Faison. You referenced a bill from DeSantis for affordable housing. Do you mind referencing the number for that bill that you're referring to?
So it's called Live Local, and I believe it's HSB. Hold on, Live. I'm gonna Google it right quick.
Okay.
It passed, didn't it?
Yeah, it passed and it goes into effect, like I said, July 1st.
What is the reference number?
One moment.
Oh, okay.
SB 102.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Are most of you here from Demerit Drive in Wall Oak?
If we're wearing blue, yes. We're just here for knowledge.
Okay. I was quite surprised at city council that they will not hear it again, nor will this commission.
Okay.
I think there's several things that need to be.
I agree.
I'm unfamiliar of what you're referencing. So you're here for knowledge, and what are you guys talking about? So what happened?
With Apollo Gardens, the development that's going in at 2727.
Why don't you state the thing, Eddie?
Sure. So this was a development that was recently added in our Titusville Talking Points magazine. The application is for a multifamily development along Demerit Drive. And the question has been whether this is truly a multifamily development or something more. And so what I've explained to a number of the residents and to some of the members of the commission who have asked questions about this is that the application that we've received says that it is a multifamily development, and the zoning on the property does permit multifamily as a use on that property. If the development were to propose an additional use that had some kind of treatment component to it, it would be viewed as a different use in the code, and that use would be a residential treatment facility, which requires a conditional use permit, which is a public hearing process that would be heard by both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council.
Okay.
It's not clear yet if it's going to be a treatment facility, as I understand.
We have spoken to the applicant, and they have assured us it is a multifamily development, but if they begin to do something outside the scope of what their use is permitted for, then we would have to use code enforcement action to make sure that they're in compliance.
So let me say this to you. I was born and raised here. All of my family's from here. We have people that represent us in the city who aren't from here. Okay? Another election year is coming around. Vote for people that represent your interest. Everyone. Vote for people that represent your interest. Don't just continue to go along to get along, go along. Too much of that continues to happen. Okay? If you do that, hopefully some of this stuff will stop.
That was, yes, and I thank you for that. That is, this whole thing has brought up a lot of attention to the negligence on our part as far as voting and being informed. So we are definitely a lot more informed at this point.
And get involved.
Yes, well, we are.
Everyone here volunteered. Nobody's getting paid to be here. We all have other jobs or other parts of our lives. There are other opportunities in this city to be involved in other areas. Please get involved. Please get involved, because when you don't and things happen and you don't know, get involved.
I would encourage some of the board members to take a drive, not only along Demerit, but take a drive all over Titusville, as I have. I try to do it every Sunday. And Demerit Drive joins into Ternisa, which it's kind of a dead end, but it continues in the condominiums to Harrison. And what they're proposing to do is build 3-story apartments in that area. And back up also to Demerit Drive, well, to come close to Demerit Drive anyway. Those 3 stories will overlook a 1-story house in some cases. But I was surprised when I heard at council the other night, and I watch every council meeting. I don't have a life. They won't come up before us. It may not come before us or city council.
He mentioned something. So the other thing about the reason why I mentioned the Live Local Act, some of us up here are also upset by it, because in that act, if it's a large enough project, the developers don't have to come before city council to ask for permission. So they can just throw houses anywhere that they want to and call it affordable housing. Okay? And that could be next to your job, it could be next to your school, anywhere, as long as they call it affordable housing, which is not good. Okay? Okay, so again, be aware of who you vote for, what laws are passed.
I wanted to address, if I could, what you just referenced, because Demerit actually stops halfway in between. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. There is a gate cutting it in half.
I've known that for 30 years.
Okay, yeah, and the frontage would be on demerit technically for that. The biggest concern was the entrance. There's one entrance in, one entrance out, and it's going to be going through the residential, the single home side alone, which the infrastructure on that road we're very concerned with as far as supporting the development, the developers coming in and out of there. There's just a number of concerns when it comes to that entire proposal.
And that is part of what you see those signs, no zone, no rezone Royal Oak.
No, that's actually a different concern. That is actually a different Royal Oak concern. That's for the golf course proposal.
Yeah, I know that, but I assumed those signs represented y'all too.
No, sir, they do not.
So we're gonna have a lot of people from Royal Oak soon.
It seems that way. Okay, thank you.
Any other citizens?
Hi, I'm Megan Moscoso, 3031 Demerit Drive. And so my question to you is, this isn't going before council. We know that. We were there a few weeks ago. We know that it doesn't come before you because it's already zoned R3. But unfortunately, this is the only position and only way that we can speak. And Eddie, I've emailed you. You emailed me back once, but I have emailed Brad countless times. I've left him countless messages. I've gone to City Hall, to their office two times to try to speak to someone. We're not anti-development. We're pro-transparency. And so that's what I want. I want to get involved. All of these people, most of the people, I won't say all, this is our first time coming to City Hall. As I'm talking to my neighbors and getting out, it's been a joy to get to know them, but it's the first time. Last week we had like 100 people here. Majority of people, it was their first time here, and it was my first time. This is my second time, and I'm so excited. I want to get involved, but I need to understand what the project is and how we can improve. Is it a residential treatment? Because the first thought when we heard about it, if it's multifamily, is it affordable housing? How can we get involved? My husband's a local pastor here in the community. We love to serve the community. What can we do to get involved? But when we started to dig into what this really was, we had questions. So I reached out to the organization in Miami. I've reached out multiple times to the city to ask, what is this project? Because I don't want to spread fear. I don't want to spread hate. I don't want it to be an us versus them thing. That's not what this is about. But we haven't gotten any answers. And unfortunately, this is the only way, by us putting on these blue shirts and standing here, is that we're able to be heard. And so what is the process? If I can't get a meeting with someone, if I can't get an email answered, if I'm not getting any information from the organization down in Miami, or you did email me back, and I know that you're saying it's multifamily, which that's what it's zoned for, and that's what they're putting in. But can we have like an honest discussion of what this is? I know that there has to be all these technical terms, but we're just really seeking information. I know you might not have that information, but how do we go forward from here so there can be transparency and that fear isn't spreading through our neighborhood? Because we don't want that, and we're doing our best to be involved in the process and to learn. But we also have to be knowledgeable about what's going in here. Exactly.
Well, I think you've made it known tonight.
Okay.
Because these meetings are recorded and they're televised on YouTube and several other places. And city council and some people in staff view these videos all the time. But as I understand it, they haven't really identified if there's a treatment facility included in this. Is that right?
Correct. We spoke with the applicant and they said that is not the case. And so without evidence otherwise, there's no enforcement action at this point. But Megan, I do appreciate you've been very pleasant every time you've contacted me. I thought I had answered all your questions, but if you have more questions, please email me.
Yeah,
Would love
you
to
have
help.
communicated. It's honestly been Brad, and I was kind of hoping he would be here so I could see him face to face.
I did also want to point out
Yeah.
that our planning department is understaffed at this point,
Yeah.
and we're receiving a historically high volume of development applications. So it's not that we're putting you off, we're just very busy at this point.
Yeah.
But definitely email us with your questions and we'll get back to you.
Okay, I heard that. Very good. Yeah. So the thing is we have read there's another development being put in, proposed called Fox Point. Have you heard of Fox Point? Okay, so it's another one right next to it. It's 15 acres. They divided it into 2 subplots. As we talk about Apollo Gardens, it's practically the same thing right there. We're digging and finding this information. We're finding there's a 132-page document that spells out what this Apollo Gardens is going to be, because they're receiving funding. So they're saying this percentage is for those with mental illness, things like that. And I'm not going to get into the details. So we're doing research, and I'm just curious as how much research does the city need to be doing on all of these developments before they get passed? And I know that there is certain zonings, but we want to be on top of it. We want to be part of the conversation, honestly. And so, I mean, I'm new at this. Please educate me on it. I'm here to learn.
I think you've taken the first step.
Okay.
And I think that rumors go around before staff finds out about it. And we don't find out about it. Because asked staff a couple of weeks ago about this, didn't I? This whole thing about Royal Oak. And they weren't aware of anything with
But
the
it's
treatment.
interesting because I've emailed everyone on April 27th, the 132-page document, as well as I've dropped this off because nobody's willing to speak with me. This exact paper, I've been up to City Hall twice and finally just dropped off a copy because nobody would speak to me. So
Somebody should speak to you.
I agree. Thank you. So it really is coming from, like, I just want to talk about it. And I appreciate this conversation here because this is a conversation.
I assume none of us have seen that
No,
brochure about
so
Apollo Gardens.
honestly, all we really know is what they tell us, and they only tell us what they want us to know so that they can get their projects approved.
Yeah.
All right. And like Joe said earlier today, so you heard him say about the clear cutting. All right. So there's a major project going on over off of US 1 over by the police academy, by the police hall of fame. They told us point blank they weren't going to cut any
Who
trees
is they?
down.
Can I ask?
The developers.
Okay.
So developers gave a plan that they were going to save so many trees, X, Y, Z. You go look there now, and then the plan was approved based on what they told us.
Or they
and
committed
city
to.
council.
Yeah.
That they committed to, and yet they went behind. Then they went and cut all the trees down. So we oftentimes are at a loss of words because we, like you, don't know. But when you dig, so I don't have time to dig. I can't speak for that. I don't have time to dig, right? But when you dig, you find something different. You're just like, well, listen, this is what they're posting. Well, we didn't know.
Oh, yeah. No, and I agree. I think you guys do not know, but I do think that I've tried to make it very clear to the city staff, and I know that they are understaffed. And when I have had a chance to email with Eddie, the one email, he was pleasant and explained what he knew. We're just trying to get the information.
City council.
I bet they haven't seen that.
City council,
So-
they have. I passed it out.
I'm going to put them on the hot seat, okay? When you take that to the city council and they don't move on an action that you bring before them and you don't like their movement, right? Let it be known at the ballot box.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Okay, let it be known at the ballot box. That's all of our. That's the only strength that any of us have, right? Is to let our voices be heard through the ballot box. That you want someone who's going to listen to you and do what you all think collectively is best for the city.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. I
I
appreciate
just
it.
had a quick question.
Yeah.
Did this pamphlet that you put together, a package that you,
Would you like a
I'd love to
copy?
have a copy. Yeah. If,
I would love to do this.
Thank you.
Member Childs.
I was going to say that I think what a lot of people don't realize too is that zoning it's available on the website GIS for the city, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is when they buy a house somewhere that there could be an empty lot, right next door or something. You think, oh, this is nice. There's, maybe there won't be anything built there, but you look it up, and if you look at the zoning, it's actually zoned for multifamily. There could be an apartment complex right there because it fits with, because we've, at some point for the city, and planning and zoning and city council has determined that that area fits that zoning category. So it happened too with the Wawa there on, that they're building on Columbia. And the people who lived in the neighborhood back, they loved that wooded area. They loved how open, how nice it looked. But it was zoned commercial since they bought the house, before they bought the house, right there. So it's just, and of course there were signs up saying, commercial land for sale. But so I think part of it is, if you do want to get informed about certain things too ahead of time, is you can go online and see the zoning areas near you, and you can see what they're zoned as. I think there's like a little description, I think. I don't know that it goes into detail about all the criteria that can be built there, but there's at least, like this shows, it'll show you commercial high intensity. You can kind of get an idea of that, so you know that there could be an industrial thing there or something. But I think if you get online, it's all online. You can look up the zoning for a certain area near you if you're really interested in what's possible. And I think the more that people know about that when they buy a house somewhere, they won't be shocked when someone says, hey, we're going to build this. Now, I know your situation is a little different because they're talking about doing medical, because I watched the city council meeting too about them saying they're going to do treatment for patients and stuff, and that are bipolar and some other issues and stuff. But I know that's a little different. Like you said, there's nothing they can really do until they really break a law. You can't really enforce anything until something's been done. But I would just suggest anyone to look up zoning online too.
We're not against, we're not, the property's beautiful, but we know that it doesn't belong to us. It can be developed. We would welcome multifamily affordable housing, but what we've looked up, if you're looking for a spot for affordable housing, we welcome it. What they're proposing, that's what we are questioning, and we want to we want to understand what is actually might possibly go there. That's really where our concern is, and so that's what we're asking for, transparency. If the city would have any further information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Hello, Christopher Curtis Hilton, 3100 Demerit Drive. I have a couple of questions tonight regarding the same topic. One thing in particular is, as I understand, the property is zoned multifamily. And in that, the paperwork submitted says that Florida Cares Health System will offer on-site services. If that is the case, does that change the zoning of that from multifamily to some kind of a business?
Good question.
So the zoning district would not change on the property. What you're describing is the application that was filed with the state, I believe. Is that
Yes.
correct? So the applicant did not submit that to the city. What we have for, what the city has received as a submittal is a site plan application to develop a multifamily apartment complex, which is a permitted use in that zoning district. And that's why there's no public hearing required, why there was no notification for the surrounding neighbors. If it turns out that what the use that they're proposing is not what they've told the city, multifamily, it's some sort of treatment facility, then that would be a code enforcement action, and they would be required to comply with our current code. Our current code states that a residential treatment facility can be permitted in that zoning district, but before they can do that, they have to first have approval by city council, which means it would come to this board first for approval, and then, or for recommendation of approval, and then to city council for final approval.
It would require a conditional use permit, right?
Right, a conditional use permit, correct.
So,
which is not always given.
Yes. So to clarify my question a little bit more, there is, what is the definition of the treatment facility? If they're just coming there to offer services, or is it when they have a office there?
So, as I quickly read through this, right? It looks like a place for people to live And in their living space, they may be offering some services. And, but it's not like a treatment service. So it's like you live here, and then let's also give you counseling while you're here. But that's a whole business thing. So I don't know where that crosses the line. But I also want to be kind of clear that you guys, that this is a building that people are going to live in, and then while living there, they're going to be provided services at home. So it's a little different than a treatment facility. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Okay, so if at any point there's offices there for treatment, that puts it in a different special,
I don't know. So,
Let me clarify by adding the definition for a residential treatment
Okay.
facility, because that's what the city would use to determine whether what
Okay.
they're actually, what the activity on the site meets that definition. One second.
I have another question too, while he's looking that up. Does the city receive any additional taxes or funding to approve affordable housing special needs facilities?
Not that I'm aware of. The law that was referenced does provide certain kickbacks to the developers.
Okay, so the city does not receive any kickbacks?
Kickbacks is not a.
Kickbacks is not the right word.
Yeah.
There's invitations for developers to develop affordable housing if they meet certain criteria, that they are allowed things that they wouldn't otherwise be allowed to do.
impact fee waivers.
So it's the.
Impact fee waivers.
Okay.
Yes. The city also has our Neighborhood Services Department where we receive CDBG funding to do certain projects. But that's not at all any of these projects that you see coming before the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval.
Okay.
And to go back to that definition, that's in section 28-79, in case you need to reference it. Residential treatment facility is defined as a facility providing residential care and treatment to individuals exhibiting symptoms of mental illness who are in need of 24-hour per day, 7-day-a-week structured living environment, respite care, or long-term care community placement, and are licensed by the Agency for Healthcare Administration, that's ACA, it's a state, and under Chapter 394, Part 4, Florida Statutes, Chapter 408, it's a long reference. Such facility is provided for developments of licensed 15 beds or more and do not meet the definition of a neighborhood group home or a community residential home as defined in our land development regulations. And so in this section, it has all of the zoning districts that the city has, and it has 2 letter Cs. C means a conditional use, so the use is permitted in the zoning district, in an R3 zoning district, but again, it has to come before the planning and zoning and city council for approval.
Okay. So at this point, based on the paperwork and that was submitted, the plan showed just as standard housing, and then that if anything changes, that it will be going before the city council for approval.
So, the plans that have been submitted to the city say that this is a multifamily development, not a residential treatment facility that's licensed by ACA. If there is a complaint filed that there's some other use going on at the site, and code enforcement can enforce the code by saying that an additional use is occurring at the site and require that they get a CUP to become consistent with the code.
So it's kind of like, it's gonna have to be built, and then they break the law, and then we get to go back and.
Well, again, what they propose at this point is just the multifamily, so if that's what they're proposing to build, then we're good. But if an additional use is occurring at the site, we need to cite them.
Okay. But that would be after it's constructed and being used.
Correct.
Okay.
Member Aton.
Just as a clarification, the way a lot of these things work is in order for the developer to get their financing, they do a business plan saying what they're going to do at the facility. So we've had several of the CUPs come before us that once the CUP got voted down, the project didn't go forward because they couldn't get the funding because it didn't meet their use. It would not unheard of, but it would be an aggressive move to build it then think that they're gonna go back and get a CUP afterward, so, just a point of information.
Member Garrard.
Just a brief question. This document, where was it provided from? You provided it to us, I understand that, but where did you get this document? Where did whoever got the document? I know a little bit more information. That's fine, I just wondered where it came from.
So there's a number of different documents referenced within that packet. I believe the one that you're probably questioning is the paper with all the legality on it. And that is from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. It's the application that they submitted through them, that they have to follow housing and urban development over US-wide. Florida Housing pumps through them and then comes through city. So that is what they have to adhere to. That's what they're committing to on their side for Florida Housing Finance Corporation as far as getting the funding. So the one thing that I have looked into with that is, I think he was just, I believe it was you that was just speaking on this, is it would be a bold move to develop that and then go back and get a conditional use. However, that has been the case with a lot of the Carrefour developments. They have services stated in the application from medical resources, medical services that are going to be on site, and they say strictly to the residents. However, when I have called those developments, they have changed that since then. They have changed it and said that it's open to the public. Therefore, it requires a different zoning. So it is, that's I think why we're a little bit concerned is they might still roll forward with it, considering that these systems will eventually, if they get that conditional use under different circumstance afterwards, once it's already gone through the approval and once they've already developed, they will probably get some kickback once that conditional use. They're going to get a lot less kickback from us and pushback from the community because it's already developed. But our concern is I've seen the parameters of which Carrefour has developed, and I've seen how they have changed their structure. And one of them, down in Miami, Northside Commons, I believe that was in Miami or West Palm Beach, but they changed one of their systems. It said the resource available for the on-site was 3 miles away. When I looked up the resource that they were talking about, the Key Clubhouse, they actually brought it into their site. They actually developed it, and it's in a suite within their actual site, and it is open to the public. So that's why there's a lot more concern, just because, and again, we're not against helping people. We're not against affordable housing. Our concern is it's one way in, one way out of a single-family home. There's the development of it. There is the upholding of certain parameters that they have to meet as far as what's going on there. And I understand, the application. May I ask, what application have they submitted to you?
A site development permit application.
Okay. Does that answer the reference?
This is a compilation.
Yes,
This is a compilation information. I saw the illustration.
Yes.
Wear blue shirts, so I knew that didn't come from the developer.
Yes.
And then you've cut and pasted some documents from state applications regarding
Yes.
this project. Okay, thank you.
I do have one quick question. So have you been able to determine what the bulk of these Carrefours, or I guess it was Crossroads, patients suffer from? I mean, is when you imagine kind of a worst case scenario, obviously I think probably nobody really wants, like, say, a drug treatment center on their street. But what do you have a kind of a feel for what their main focus is?
Yes, so affordable housing within it, if a special needs demographic commitment is selected, there's 5 parameters. And the one parameter that will be met on this specific location out of those 5 is specific to mental illness. That is, it's adult housing. There are in that 132-page packet that we keep referencing, there are certain percentages that of the overall residents that this will be that, this will be that. This will be that type of resident, this will be that type of resident. Within that, they have their own definitions of what mental illness includes on that exact document that we're referencing, and it includes schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, substance use disorder, et cetera.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, my name's Trish German, 392 Waterside Circle. I came here to learn about the demerit project. I didn't realize you guys were all volunteers. I'd like to thank all of you. This takes a lot of time.
You
and
think we're paid to be here?
No. I've never given this any thought at all until, and this is my first time coming to something like this. I don't want to take away from what they're doing at all, but that's not what I came up here to talk about. I live on a 50-foot wide lot, and so I just wanted to speak to that. When we moved in, we had to have 2 trees left from the developer. They were pine trees. Apparently, where I live, the whole area was pine trees. So they left 2 skinny little pine trees that we immediately chopped down because they're going to blow down. Pine trees need to have a bunch of them together to work. So the developer followed the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. They then planted oak trees, big live oaks. Our yards are 20 feet deep. So 10, 15 years later, at a huge expense to all the homeowners, most of them had to take them down because they're too huge. Another thing so I would encourage you guys to have developers take that into consideration. Don't plant giant trees in these yards. Also, if you're going to have a 40-foot wide lot, you're by definition going to have a long, skinny house. I had to pay to put gutters on my neighbor's house because there was so much water coming off the roofs between. So that is something, and not 5-foot gutters, or 5-inch, the 6-inch, So this is something else I would encourage you guys to encourage too, developers. To the cars on the street, you got to have 2 car wide driveways. You have to, because even with ours, we have double car garages and we have the wider driveways. Getting moving trucks through there, getting the all the trucks, all the things, it is difficult. And we don't allow street parking, but it happens. So anyway, I give these guys so much credit for coming, and thank you guys all. And that was it. I just wanted to give that feedback.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, next item we're going to discuss is accessory dwelling units. But first, I'd like to ask, how many members of the commission are going to the Affordable Housing Summit tomorrow? 1, 2. Okay. 4 of us?
Yes, I'm going.
Eddie is going to be there. I'm going to be there. I know Vice Mayor Robinson's going to be there. Are you going to be there, Chelsea?
In spirit.
There you go. Okay. So do you want to dive into this accessory dwelling units discussion now, given that some of this will be discussed from the whole county tomorrow?
All right, so I do not want to dive into it right now, but our audience may not know what it is. And so let's just give them a quick snapshot of what you're talking
Okay, go ahead. Wait a minute. Chelsea?
You can go ahead with your snapshot, but I want to speak when you're.
You can speak now. All right. So real quickly, guys, I like to not be polished, so please do forgive me. I actually am an engineer. I work at Lockheed, so I am kind of polished. But when I'm here, I'm Titusville, born, bred, and raised. All right. So I'm gonna give it to you just like that. All right. So an accessory dwelling unit is an opportunity for those that have a lot of said size. I think here we're gonna agree with 10,000 square feet or larger. You can put an additional unit in your backyard as a way to earn additional income. So a little mother-in-law suite or whatever you want to call it, okay? It's going to be a certain size that we haven't determined yet what it's going to be, but let's say 600 square feet.
And we currently allow these.
And we currently allow these right now, as a matter of fact. All right, and so... Huh?
Not just make money to provide affordable housing.
To provide affordable housing. But additional unit in your backyard. And it can be either attached or detached. If it's attached, there must be a way in and out of the main unit. So, for example, a long time ago, a lot of folks around this area closed off their garages. Well, that could have been considered an additional dwelling unit that you could have rented out if you would have put a kitchen and a bathroom in it. Okay, there's some parameters to it. But with that being said, if you guys know of anyone that's looking for that type of thing, the city of Titusville allows it now. Not many people are taking advantage of it or not legally getting permits for it. And so that's what we're discussing.
There's one within a block of here. It's a 120-year-old house, and it has an accessory dwelling unit. She was a former chairman of this commission.
Yeah.
And she used it for Airbnb or something like that. But it is, the primary reason we discussed it was somehow, in some way, it'll help address the affordable housing. Because we're concerned about people like our teachers, police officers, don't make much money. They can't afford these houses that the developers come up here and propose. And that's the reason we started the discussion, and it will probably continue for the next month or two.
If I lived if I had a bigger lot, my parents right now, I would love to give them my house. My dad is no longer mobile, and he needs the space. Where my parents live, it's not conducive for him. And if it were me, if my lot was bigger, which it's not, I would put one in the backyard. I would move it into the backyard and give my parents my home. So there's a lot of uses for it.
So do we agree then that we'll continue this discussion at the next meeting,
Yes, sir.
depending on how many items are on the agenda? As long as we don't have to stay here till 5 o'clock like council did recently. Chelsea?
Okay, so also for the benefit of those here in the audience who want to learn and for the board members who are going to be attending the event tomorrow. Tomorrow's event is a countywide summit on affordable housing. It's located in Cocoa. We have invited our board members to attend for the purpose of their education. When we have 2 or more members of a board that are in one place for a long period of time, there's a tendency that they may have an opportunity to speak to one another. So the Sunshine Law governs.
We gotta keep our mouth shut.
The Sunshine Law says that if 2 or more members of this board or any other board in the state of Florida that is under the Sunshine Law is going to have an opportunity to speak to one another, then their conversation must be restricted by Sunshine Law. Otherwise, they could face individual criminal penalties or go to jail. And they are not allowed to talk to each other about any official business that may come before this board at any time tomorrow when you're there together, unless it's officially being designated as a meeting, which it's not, and minutes are being kept, which they're not, and open to the public, which it is. So since all 3 of those things are not happening tomorrow, please be on your best behavior and don't tell each other things that you shouldn't talk about that are subject to this board's decision-making ability.
In other words, see what the legislature has done to us. I'm serious.
There's going to be a sunshine refresher at your next meeting.
Okay, so we'll deal with 11A at the next meeting.
Yes, sir, at the podium, if the board lets you.
Yeah.
Michael Myjack, Titusville. Member Faison, I want to buy you a cup of coffee. You are a bright, fresh of
I don't
air.
think you can do that according to Sunshine.
Well, maybe not. But we're not on the same committee.
That's an ethics violation.
Yeah, exactly.
I used to teach
Well,
that
he can
class,
buy his
by the
own
way.
cup of coffee then, but I'd like to share one with you. The idea of affordable housing is clearly an issue. And I guess my question is really more for Chelsea. And is it possible for the city to devise an ordinance that specifies in future developments that a certain percentage, 10, 20%, are designated for those that have an income of 45K or less?
I
Or
agree completely
80K or
with
less?
that.
Can we do some kind of zoning across the city or some sort of ordinance that would allow us to then tamp down this overdevelopment of high-end homes that's, well, if you've looked at what's happening across the way, you guys know there's a tsunami coming our way in the next 10, 20 years. It's inevitable. It's going to look like, we look like Detroit did in 1900. So just imagine what we're going to look like in another 20 years. Because in 10, NASA's moving north to Shiloh. It's already in their future land use map. I don't know if you know it, but in 34, that's the plan. They're going to abandon here and move north where the higher ground is because ocean level's rising, you know? But the one thing I did want to mention to you guys that we've been talking about, Laura Lee Thompson and I have been pushing on the TEC, and I'd like to make you guys aware of it too. And this is a bigger game plan, a 20, 30-year plan. We would like to see the city procure the forested wetlands throughout the center of our city from north to south. There's about 13 of them. And we would like to see the city take an aggressive path to redirect the stormwater going into the lagoon into these forested wetlands. 3 big wins. 1, we increase the salinity of the lagoon because right now in the summertime, we're at 15 parts per thousand. Clams, oysters need 20, seagrass 20, more, 22. Sea trout need to have that in order to be able to have their eggs spawn. So at 15 parts per thousand in the summertime in the rain, we don't have enough salt water anymore. Plus everything that it carries, the effluent, the muck. You know, we already know that there's a tremendous problem, and we know that it comes from stormwater because when we look at the Mosquito Lagoon, it's starting to recover where it doesn't have the problem of stormwater that we've created. So we get the stormwater not to go in the lagoon, but to go into these wetlands. We start recharging our well fields. Our superficial aquifer needs this aggressive approach in the future if we're going to meet our future water demands. We can't stop. We have to stop putting impervious surface on our areas of critical concern, like we did with Brookshire. My God, I don't know what that's going to do to Wellfield 2, but I was here 30 years ago when we put in Astronaut High, and it dropped. And then we had a drought in 98, and it was like, well, we had 500,000 acres of fire. And I don't know how many of you guys have been here then, but we have a water resource issue. If we're going to grow the city by 20,000 people, where's the water going to come from? We need to restore our water. We need to restore our lagoon. And we need to grow this city with a huge central park and pathways and bikeways that could make this city something green. The waterways that we design, we can integrate that with a canopy system for our roadways because we're going to have to start engineering with nature, not against it, if we expect to survive here. So I wanted to let this idea come before you guys, or at least you're recorded and we're not. Although we do have a couple of ad hoc recordings on the making. But think about this as a future growth path for the city, that we can get together and support our future. It's a long-range project. It's going to take bonds. It's going to take referendums like we did when we bought riverfront property, but it's going to take the will of the city and the people. And so I hope you guys will consider that, especially when we start talking about the Royal Oak Golf Course and that's conversion from green space and open space to something incompatible like concrete.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Your light.
I was just going to mention one thing about the tiny house thing, or the accessory dwelling unit, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for the people who are going to that, to me, I think one of the key questions is, what is the size range that works in places that have been doing it? It seems to me that 200 to 600 square feet might be about this kind of sweet spot. But anyway, I was just going to say, when you're talking to people who know, I would just ask you to ask that question.
Okay. Next item, you might want to stay for this. Cue the video. This is about our community development department, the spotlight.
City of Titusville Community Development Department, can I help you?
Hi, I'd like to get a building permit. Can I speak to someone in the building department?
Okay, I'll transfer you now.
Building department, how can I help you?
Hi, I'm looking to get a building permit. Does your department do that?
Do we ever? In the past year, we've approved 4,828 building permits and conducted 13,855 building inspections and re-inspections. Every year just gets more and more busy. Our department hired 2 additional personnel, so now we have 11 staff members dedicated to enforce the Florida Building Code, making sure our structures are safe. And while the number of permit requests we've received increased, we've also managed to decrease our cost by 22.5%.
That's great and all, but what exactly can I do on this property? I want to do my research before I buy.
Well, that's a planning question. Let me go ahead and transfer you.
Good afternoon, planning. This is Eddie. How can I help you?
Hi, I'm looking at a piece of property. Can you help me out?
You've come to the right place. I can help with that. We maintain the city's comprehensive plan, zoning map, and land development regulations. And we also process planning applications like conditional use permits, comprehensive plan amendments, and rezoning requests. We are keeping busy. In the last year, the planning department received a total of 82 planning applications. This represents a 78% increase in the number of applications over the last 5-year average of just 46 applications per year. And 2023 is on pace to be just as busy. Additionally, our planning staff works with the Titusville Environmental Commission to achieve our 22nd consecutive year as a Tree City USA. Through the Florida Forest Service, we provided 50 free residential trees to celebrate Arbor Day and received $17,000 in grant funding to complete an urban tree canopy assessment. Our team also received $30,000 in grant funding from Florida Department of Environmental Protection to conduct resiliency stewardship and outreach.
You sure are busy, but the lot I'm looking at doesn't have an address. Can I speak to someone about that?
Okay, I'll transfer you over.
Hello, City of Titusville GIS.
I'm looking to get an address for my lot. Does your department do that?
Yes, we could definitely help you get an address. Our GIS staff has assigned 865 addresses in the past 15 months. Our zoning and future land use map also tells you current zoning and land use so you can decipher what can be built there. The zoning and future land use map received more than 8,000 views in the past year. Our department has also created more than 400 maps for council and zoning meetings. We also maintain an inventory for all the city streets and other infrastructure for our other departments and other online maps that provide a great deal of information to get the general public on the city's website. If you haven't visited yet, please make sure to check us out at www.titusville.com.
But I think this property is in the downtown area. Does that change anything?
I'll transfer you to the Community Development Agency.
Community Redevelopment Agency, how can I help you?
I'm looking at a piece of property in the downtown area. Can you help me with that?
We sure can.
The CRA is committed to making Titusville's downtown a vibrant place people keep wanting to come back to. We administer the Building Grant Program, which awarded 10 grants, of which 8 were facade and 2 were commercial interior, for a total of $200,900. 5 grants were paid out, totaling $39,800, and additionally, the CRA funded the following capital improvements in the CRA district: drainage pipe improvements at $130,000, sidewalk infill at $58,000, Julia Street pedestrian lights at $60,200, street resurfacing at $181,300. 1 bicycle repair station was installed at Sandpoint Park at $1,600, and 12 park benches were installed at Sandpoint Park for $4,700. 2 shade structures were erected at the Marina Park Dog Park at $65,100. 3 Grid Smart intersection detection cameras were installed at Main Street at a total of $43,400. Replacement downtown light pole banners were installed on the light poles at $4,000. The Community Development Department also works with the city's Historic Preservation Board. We received an award for the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation for its 2022 Communications Media Award for the board's Explore Historic Titusville booklet, website, and mobile app. They also were awarded a grant from the State of Florida Department of Historic Resources to create architectural guidelines for historic buildings in the city. The Historic Board also applied for a 2024 small matching grant from the state of Florida Department of Historic Resources to document and celebrate the city's Black history.
Wow, that's a lot of accomplishments. But speaking of grants, which housing grants will I be eligible for?
That's a great question for our Neighborhood Services Department. Let me see if I can transfer you over there now.
Neighborhood Services, how can I help you?
I'd like to know which grants I'm eligible for.
Well, we administer many grants and neighborhood services for the city. Just in the past year, we've administered many types of federal and state grants, totaling over $1 million awarded to the city. These grants can assist developers, homeowners, homebuyers, and renters. Over the year, we've assisted 2 families purchase their first home through our first-time homebuyer program, utilizing $60,000 in federal funds. We assisted 6 homeowners with repairs to their home, utilizing federal and state grants totaling over $219,000. We assisted 26 households with emergency payments for rent and utilities, totaling $169,685. We provided funding to 3 nonprofit agencies to provide various public services to 61 individuals in the community, utilizing $30,764 in federal funds. We provided subsidy funding totaling $136,615 to fund a new multifamily rental unit development for the homeless. And we further utilized federal grant funds to provide a community food program at the Harry T. Moore Social Service Center, which served over 8,100 meals using $37,409 in COVID-19 relief funds through the American Rescue Plan Act. Additionally, we provided funding totaling over $230,000 to nonprofit agencies to assist children and families in Titusville recover from the impacts of the pandemic.
Sounds good. I think I'm ready to schedule my site plan review meeting.
Okay, our development services team will help you schedule your site plan review meeting. So let me go ahead and transfer you over there.
Development Services, how can I help you?
Can I schedule a site plan review meeting?
Yeah, well, we're pretty busy right now, but I think we can fit you in. Believe it or not, 2022 has been a record-breaking year for our department. We've actually received 43 new site plan projects, which represents an 87% increase in new projects compared to 2021. Site plan projects can consist of subdivision, multifamily projects, and commercial and industrial products. Additionally, 14 site permits were issued for project construction for a 100% increase compared to site permit issuance in 2021. In 2022, our department issued 2,491 business tax receipts, which represent all of the businesses in Titusville, both commercial and home-based. Of those, 172 were new businesses in the city.
Well, I wasn't expecting to get all of this information out of a phone call, but I sure do appreciate everyone's help. Thank you.
Thank you for contacting the Community Development Department.
Eddie, that I thought that was a very good presentation, but I hate to be the guy whose call was transferred that many times.
And you had to listen now.
But anyway, that is what they're doing. And Brad Parrish is now the Community Development Director. He was previously the Planning Manager. And next item on our agenda is, if I can pull it up, reports. City staff, do you have any report?
Just that I will see some of you tomorrow at in Cocoa Village.
Yeah. The Cocoa Civic Center, it's on, I forget what street, but it's close to the river. City Attorney.
No update, thank you.
And I would have just a brief report. I'm usually driving around Titusville on Sundays. And last Sunday, I spent 3 hours in the car looking at development projects, areas that need development. And I would encourage you to do the same. You'll see that we don't get what we agree to in a lot of cases. Landscaping plans, even site plans, when it comes to be built, it looks a little different. And there are some that I think turned out much better. And I would point out that the Fox Hollow, or whatever it is, development on the east side of 405 is a good example of saving the trees, protecting the wetlands. I was impressed. And I'm even impressed with Wawa saving the trees around the Wawa development. I'm not as happy because I've advocated that if we didn't have a Chick-fil-A, we should have a Culver's, that they took down every tree. And they're right now, as far as I see it, they're digging up that muck that's on that lot. There's some bigger developments that I'll just hold my tongue that are going on. But I would encourage y'all to drive around independently without anybody else, so you don't get in the sunshine law. Drive around our community and see what's going on. There's a lot more going on than you're thinking, because I think the next time we have the census, we'll grow much more than we thought we would. And I'm afraid that what we talked about at the beginning of the meeting regarding the utilities plan amendment and the water, I think we'll run out of water closer than 11 years. Just take a drive. Also, there's places that should be developed that aren't. And this one is not in the city limits, and it's in the county. It was close to where we talked about earlier, and that's Old Dixie Elementary School. 11 acres that has been overrun with garbage and graffiti and things like that. It could be developed. The water and sewer is there on the property.
Where is that?
Old Dixie Elementary, right off Old Dixie. It was an elementary school built at the same time Imperial Estates was, in 69, I think. But it closed in 74. It wasn't open that long. I think so. But also, I saw, I don't usually go in there, along Garden Street between McDonald's and O'Reilly's Auto Parts, that road, there's already a subdivision that's, the streets are in.
Oh, wow.
Water and sewer's in, and utilities are in, that's been vacant for at least 10 years.
Oh, right.
No building at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would encourage you to drive around Titusville when you get a chance. Any other reports?
He was first. I think.
Mr. Grod.
Along the same lines of driving around and looking at things, I might also suggest that it's what I would, my opinion is that there's going to be a future in which as a new member, I'm seeing what appears to be more first fold with higher density residential developments, and some of the issues that should be addressed need to be addressed before it gets to where other communities have suffered through the trials of fire, learning the curve and getting behind the curve on such things as street designs and setback requirements that we're speaking of earlier. You can pick a city in Central Florida more so than here on the East Coast, and whether it's KB Homes or US Homes, Lanier Homes, they're templated. They look like this, and that's something you might want to go by and see the problems that ensue when you have development, that you don't have the development standard designs, like tree protection. In one case, person out in the audience spoke about planting pine trees, and it didn't work. All those things you can see readily just looking around communities, whether it's in Orange County or whether it's Seminole, whether it's Osceola, whether it's Polk, and you can see the trademarks of these problems that all of the above tonight were representative from my experience, whether it's affordable housing, and the statutes that are coming because of that are going to really make everyone have to look at these codes again. I really implore everybody to think that way. That was the purpose of my motion earlier, because it's coming, and you can see how when you're preempted a local government from even being able to say yes or no, you should at least have a fallback of a set of standards that improve the development quality, the things that you speak about being concerned about.
Member Rogers.
I just was going to ask whether, regarding cutting all these trees down at the, I always forget the name, over near the causeway. Is that what we're talking about? Somebody mentioned that they clear cut that property over near the causeway.
Tranquility.
Tranquility, yeah. Do we have any recourse?
It's not tranquil anymore.
Is there anything that can be done about that? Like if they violated an agreement?
Sure, if they are removing more trees than what was approved in their development plan, yes, there's absolutely enforcement action.
I mean, maybe it's not very professional, but I'm kind of angry about that. And I hope that everybody else gets angry about it too, and that maybe, the commission gets angry about it, and they kind of like smack those guys' hands, because that's, we had them in here, we had a long talk about it, and I think they understood. I don't know. I'm angry.
Members facing.
I had turned off just before that because I didn't want to be a dead horse. But looking at other communities like Charleston or Savannah, the city of Titusville did a tree ordinance for a reason, and I know that it's easier and more cost effective to just mow down trees or even just say yes to the people that come up here. Just say yes. It's easier. But Titusville deserves to be the premier town, not city, but town in Brevard County. And we're only going to make that happen when we start saying no.
Any other reports? Vice Chairman Aton.
Mine's just to kind of back up the water, since we're beating a lot of horses tonight. If you look at the chart I referred to early in the meeting on whatever it is, page 44, the population numbers between 2022 and 2035 is 13,000 people, less than 13,000 people. Based on just Verona, 2,600 rooftops, 3 people or 2 point whatever it is per rooftop, I just don't see how these numbers are even close. I mean, you look at talking points, you look at all of the developments and the things that you guys have already got going that the video speaks to, all those increases. It just doesn't add up. It's just math, but it doesn't add up to me. So.
Yep. Any other discussion? Anything else? This meeting is adjourned, and we'll see all of y'all that attend tomorrow at 9 o'clock. You probably need